My own pack pushed me off Widow's Peak to make my death look like an accident. 300 feet straight into the freezing river below. They thought that was the end of the weak Omega. They didn't know the Alpha King was hunting at the bottom of that cliff, and he had been waiting for me to fall. Our natural speed, carrying him over terrain that would have taken humans hours to cross. He expected to find a corpse. Instead, he found a miracle in progress. The girl, and she was young, barely more than 20, had somehow made it to the shallow rocks despite injuries that should have killed her 3 times over. She was conscious, which was impossible. She was moving, trying to drag herself toward the tree line, which was insane, and when her eyes locked with his electric blue, glowing with pain and something fiercer, he felt a jolt of recognition so profound it staggered him. Resonance, the rarest of phenomena, the sign of ancient bloodline meeting ancient bloodline. This broken, dying girl had power in her veins that rivaled his own. Which raised one very important question. Why was someone with ancient lichen blood falling off cliffs in the middle of storms? "Who are you?" Theron asked, kneeling beside her. "Elena," she rasped. "Elena Ashford, and you need to let me die. Please. It's easier if I just, who did this?" He touched her forehead, felt the wrongness immediately. Suppression, poison, 18 years of systematic sabotage woven through her very DNA. "Who's been dosing you?" "Everyone," she whispered. "My whole pack. They said I was broken, said I couldn't shift, said I was worthless." Her eyes started to close. Theron made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "You're not dying today," he said, gathering her into his arms. "Because if someone went through this much trouble to kill you, you must be absolutely terrifying. And I want to see what happens when you wake up angry. This is the story of a murder that failed, and the revenge that didn't. If you want to see Elena wake up angry, and trust me, you do smash that like button right now. Because what happens when an Alpha King teaches a suppressed wolf how to hunt? Let's find out who pushed her off that cliff." Chapter 1. The Betrayal. The storm had been building all day. Dark clouds rolling in from the western mountains like an invading army. By evening, the rain came down in torrential sheets, turning the narrow hiking trail up Widow's Peak into a treacherous river of mud and loose gravel. Elena's boots slipped with every step, her thin cardigan already soaked through, clinging to her small frame like a second skin that offered no warmth. She wiped water from her eyes, squinting into the premature darkness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the third reminder of the message that had brought her here. "Meet me at Widow's Peak, 8 p.m. urgent. We need to talk about the ceremony." The mating ceremony. It was supposed to happen in 2 weeks, the culmination of a bond that had been arranged since they were children. Elena and Damien. The future Alpha and his Luna. It should have been the happiest time of her life. Instead, it had become a countdown to her execution. Elena's wolf had never emerged. 22 years old, and she still couldn't shift. In wolf culture, that made her latent, a genetic dead end. The pack elders whispered about it in corners, their disappointment barely masked. Damien's father, Alpha Gideon, had started making pointed comments about strong bloodlines and viable heirs. And Damien himself had grown distant, his touches perfunctory, his kisses cold and brief. She knew what was coming. She'd known for months. But the coward in her had hoped, prayed, that love would be enough. That the boy who had defended her against bullies, who had promised her forever under the old oak tree, would fight for her. "Damien?" she called out, her voice snatched away by howling wind. A figure materialized from behind a massive, lightning-scared pine tree. Damien stood with his hands shoved into the pockets of his expensive rain jacket, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a statue carved from marble, beautiful, cold, and utterly unreachable. "You came," he said flatly. Not a greeting, just an observation. "Of course I came." Elena's teeth chattered as she spoke, though she wasn't sure if it was from cold or the growing dread in her stomach. She took a hesitant step forward. Damien, what's wrong? Is it your father? Is the ceremony? My father is dying. Damien interrupted, his voice devoid of emotion. Water dripped steadily from his nose and chin. The healers give him 3 months, maybe less. When he passes, I become alpha of the Silverpine pack. Elena felt her heart clench. I'm so sorry, I know you too. Have had your differences. But the pack needs strength, Elena. He finally looked directly at her, and the emptiness in his gaze made her stomach drop. They need an alpha who can provide powerful heirs. A Luna who can shift, who can fight, who can lead beside me when I go to war. The words hit her like physical blows. We've talked about this, she said, hating how her voice wavered. Doctor, Castellan said my wolf could still emerge. Late bloomers aren't unheard of. My bloodline is pure. Damien, the Ashfords have been part of Silverpine for 8 generations. It's not a late bloom. The cruelty in his voice was like a slap. You're broken, Elena. You're a genetic anomaly. The elders have been patient, but patience has limits. I have limits. Elena took a step back, her heel catching on a root. Behind her she could hear the roar of the river far below, swollen with rainfall, violent and hungry. Damien, you're scaring me. What are you saying? Movement in the shadows. Another figure emerged from the tree line, and Elena's blood turned to ice. Vivienne Blackthorn. Tall, willowy, with raven-black hair and amber eyes that gleamed with predatory satisfaction. She was the daughter of the pack's beta, a powerful shifter in her own right, and Elena's former best friend. Former being the key word. He says he's done waiting. Vivienne purred, moving to Damien's side and threading her arm possessively through his. She looked at Elena with a mixture of pity and triumph that made bile rise in Elena's throat. The Silverpine pack can't afford a weak Luna. Damien needs a real wolf. He needs me. The betrayal was a knife twisting in Elena's chest. Vivienne, she breathed, her voice breaking. You knew how much I loved him. We grew up together. We were like sisters. Love is a luxury, Elena, Vivienne said, examining her manicured nails as if bored. Survival is a necessity. Damien needs a mate who can give him strong pups, secure alliances, and fight beside him. You were always going to be left behind. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. Vivienne is carrying my child, Damien stated. Each word a hammer blow. She's been pregnant for 6 weeks. It's my heir. The world tilted violently. Elena stared at them, rain mixing with the hot tears that suddenly streamed down her face. Pregnant? She whispered. But we were supposed to be mates. We were. We rejected the bond. Damien said, taking a step toward her. His boots squelched in the mud. The elders sanctioned it this morning in a close session. Officially, you are no longer my intended mate. You are no longer the future Luna. You are no longer anything to this pack. Elena's pride, the last shred of dignity she had left, made her straighten her spine, despite the pain threatening to break her in half. Fine. She choked out. I'll leave. Tonight. I'll go to the city, find work, start over. You'll never have to see me again. Damien shook his head slowly, and something in that gesture made true fear spike through Elena's veins. I can't let you do that. What? Her voice came out small, childlike. You know too much about our border agreements. Damien explained, his tone almost apologetic. Almost. The deals with the Eastern packs, the weapon shipments, the territory disputes we've kept quiet. If you leave angry, if you talk to the wrong people, it could destabilize everything I've worked for. I would never. Elena backed up another step. The edge of the cliff was close now. Too close. Rocks skittered beneath her feet, tumbling into the darkness. I would never betray the pack. Damien, you know me. And you're popular, Vivienne added, her smile sharp as broken glass. The common pack members love you. If Damien exiles you, you become a martyr, a symbol of his cruelty. It weakens his rule before it even begins. We can't have that. Understanding crashed over Elena like a freezing wave. Her eyes widened in horror as she looked from Vivian to Damien. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't be serious. It's tragic, really." Vivian continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The grief-stricken girl, devastated by her inability to shift, distraught over losing her mate, takes a walk in the storm to clear her head. She ventures too close to the edge. The ground is slippery. She loses her footing. A terrible, terrible accident. Elena turned to run. She made it 3 steps before Damien moved. He was fast alpha blood made him supernaturally quick even in human form. His hand clamped around her wrist, jerking her backward. She screamed, twisting, trying to break free, but he was so much stronger. "I'm sorry, Elena," Damien said, and for a split second, just one heartbeat, she saw genuine regret flicker across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. "This isn't personal, it's just politics." He released her wrist and shoved both hands into her shoulders with the force of a battering ram. Elena's feet left the ground. Time seemed to stretch and slow. She saw Damien's face illuminated by a flash of lightning, handsome, terrible, watching her fall with those dead gray eyes. She saw Vivian behind him, one hand on her flat stomach, smiling. Then there was only the rushing wind, the freezing rain, and the terrible certainty of the rocks below. Elena screamed until her voice gave out. Her body twisted in the air, arms flailing uselessly. She caught a glimpse of the river-white water churning like a living thing, littered with jagged boulders that jutted up like broken teeth. The impact was catastrophic. Her body hit the water at a brutal angle, and the cold was so intense it felt like fire. Water rushed into her nose, her mouth, her lungs. Pain exploded through her left leg as it struck something solid, beneath the surface. Her shoulder wrenched violently as the current seized her, dragging her under, tumbling her like debris. "I'm going to die," she thought with strange clarity. "He killed me. Damien killed me." The river battered her against rocks, each impact sending fresh waves of agony through her broken body. She tried to swim, to fight, but her limbs wouldn't respond. The current was too strong and she was too broken. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The cold seeped into her bones, into her soul. Elena stopped fighting. She let the river take her, dragging her down into the black depths. Her last conscious thought was a simple one. "I hope he suffers for this." Then the darkness consumed her completely, and Elena Ashford ceased to exist. Chapter 2. The Alpha King. Pain. It wasn't a sensation, it was a universe. It was the only thing that existed in the void. White-hot, all-consuming, absolute. Elena became aware of it slowly, like surfacing from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. Every nerve in her body screamed. Her ribs felt like shattered glass, grinding against her lungs with each shallow breath. Her left leg was a symphony of agony, bent at an angle that made her stomach lurch even through the haze. Her right shoulder burned with a dislocated wrongness that sent lightning bolts of pain shooting down her arm. She tried to open her eyes. One responded. The other was swollen shut. Gray dawn light filtered through a canopy of ancient pines. She was lying on a bank of jagged river stones, each one digging into her battered flesh. The shadow-veined river rushed past mere feet away, its surface still choppy and violent from the storm. The air smelled of wet earth, pine sap, and her own blood. "I'm alive." The thought was equal parts miracle and curse. Elena tried to move and immediately regretted it. A strangled cry tore from her raw throat as fresh agony exploded through her broken body. Her left leg wouldn't respond at all. Her right arm hung at a sickening angle. Her blood stained the rocks around her in dark, spreading pools. Memory crashed back with brutal clarity. Damien's cold eyes, Vivian's triumphant smile, the push, the fall, the impact. He tried to kill me. Not just rejected her, not just broken her heart. He had actively, deliberately tried to murder her, to erase her like she was nothing more than an inconvenient problem. And Vivian, her best friend since childhood, had helped him plan it. Rage bubbled up through the pain, hot and sustaining. It gave her enough strength to dig her good hand into the mud and try to drag herself toward the tree line. If Damien sent trackers to confirm the kill, she was exposed here, vulnerable, an easy target. She made it approximately 3 feet before her strength gave out completely. Her vision grayed at the edges. She collapsed face first into the mud, tasting earth and copper. So this is how I die, she thought distantly, alone in the mud while he celebrates his new heir with my best friend. A twig snapped. It wasn't the crack of a branch falling naturally. It was heavy, deliberate, the sound of weight being placed with purpose. Elena's working eye flew open. Through the misty dawn, she saw a shadow moving between the trees. It was massive, too large to be human, too broad to be a normal wolf. As it emerged from the fog, Elena's breath caught in her ruined throat. A low growl vibrated through the ground, so deep and resonant it shook the stones beneath her cheek. Then she saw the eyes, not the yellow of a beta wolf, not the red of an angry alpha. These eyes were violet, a deep electric purple that seemed to swirl and pulse with their own inner light, like galaxies had been captured and compressed into irises. Purple eyes meant only one thing in wolf culture: royalty. The Lycan bloodline, the original shifters. The creature stepped fully into the pale morning light, and Elena stopped breathing altogether. It was a man. But calling him merely a man was like calling a hurricane merely weather. He stood at least 6 feet 8 inches tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the width of a doorframe. He was shirtless despite the cold, revealing a torso that looked carved from granite, all defined muscle, hard plains, and a roadmap of scars that spoke of countless battles survived. Rain-soaked, black hair fell past his shoulders, framing a face that was all sharp angles and brutal beauty. His jaw was strong enough to break stone. His cheekbones could cut glass. But it was those eyes, those impossible violet eyes, that held her transfixed. This was Theron Nightshade, the Alpha King, the immortal wolf, who ruled the Northern Territories with absolute authority. The man who was said to have personally executed over 100 traitors by ripping their throats out with his teeth. The legend who had fought in the Great Pack Wars 2 centuries ago and emerged as the sole survivor of his bloodline. His territory bordered the Shadow Vein River. Elena had washed up on the wrong side of the boundary, and trespassing on Shadowland was punishable by immediate death. Theron moved closer with the fluid grace of a predator, his bare feet silent on the stones. He crouched down beside her broken body, and Elena couldn't even flinch away. She was too damaged, too exhausted, too defeated. He studied her with those unnerving violet eyes, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward and inhaled deeply, scenting her. "Silver pine," he rumbled. His voice was like rocks grinding together deep underground, rough, ancient, dangerous. "You smell like betrayal and wet dog." Elena tried to speak, but only a pathetic whimper emerged from her damaged throat. "Trespassing on Shadowland carries a death sentence," Theron continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than her imminent execution. "The penalty is non-negotiable. I've killed for less." He reached out with one large hand. Elena flinched, expecting the killing blow, a quick snap of her neck, maybe, or claws through her heart. Instead, his rough fingers brushed the matted hair away from her forehead with surprising gentleness. He touched the gash there, still bleeding sluggishly, and the moment his skin made contact with hers, something extraordinary happened. Electricity. It wasn't a metaphor. Actual electrical current surged between them, hot, jarring, unmistakable. It shot through Elena's broken body, like lightning, making her gasps. Every nerve ending that wasn't already screaming in pain suddenly lit up with a different sensation entirely. Recognition, connection, rightness. Theron jerked his hand back as if burned. For the first time, his stoic expression cracked. His violet eyes widened fractionally, and something that might have been shock flickered across his features before he locked it down. Impossible, he muttered, staring at his hand like it had betrayed him. He looked at her more carefully now, his gaze cataloging her injuries with clinical precision. The broken leg twisted at an unnatural angle, the dislocated shoulder, the ribs that were clearly fractured, possibly puncturing internal organs, the bruises blooming across her pale skin like grotesque flowers, the hypothermia setting in from the river's freezing temperature. His expression shifted from shock to something darker, colder, more terrifying, rage. But the rage wasn't directed at her. His gaze snapped up to the cliff face high above them, barely visible through the morning mist. His lip curled back from his teeth, and they were sharp, Elena noticed. Too sharp. His canines were already lengthening, the wolf rising to the surface in response to his fury. "Who did this to you?" he demanded. The command in his voice was absolute, laced with alpha authority that compelled obedience even from those outside his pack. "Damien," Elena whispered. The name tasted like ash and poison. Damien Cross, alpha heir of Silverpeen. Theron's eyes flashed brighter purple, nearly glowing now. "The boy who plays at being a leader," he said with utter contempt. "I should have killed his father years ago for the border violations. Seems the rot runs in the bloodline." He stood up to his full, intimidating height and looked around the forest, his senses expanding outward. Elena could feel it, the pulse of his power rolling out like a shockwave, checking for pursuers, for threats, for witnesses. Finding none, he looked back down at her. "If I leave you here, you die within the hour," he stated with brutal honesty. "Internal bleeding, organ failure, hypothermia, take your pick." Elena's working eye began to close. She was so tired, so cold. Death seemed almost peaceful compared to the agony consuming her. "If I take you," Theron continued, his voice cutting through the fog, trying to claim her. "You belong to me. My pack does not harbor refugees. We do not shelter the weak. We only keep warriors, assets, tools that serve a purpose." He crouched down again, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could see flecks of silver in the violet of his eyes, could smell him pine and smoke, and something wild and ancient that had no name. "So tell me, little wolf," he said softly, dangerously, "which are you, warrior or worthless?" Elena didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe it was spite, pure, undiluted hatred for Damien and Viviane, and everyone who had dismissed her as broken. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was the strange electricity still humming under her skin from his touch. She met his violet gaze with her one working eye and rasped, "I am the one who will destroy them." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rush of the river and Elena's labored breathing. Then, slowly, a smile curved Theron's mouth. It wasn't kind, it wasn't warm. It was the smiles of an apex predator recognizing a kindred spirit. It was the smile of a king finding a weapon he could wield. "Good answer," he murmured. He bent down and scooped her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. The movement jostled her broken ribs, and white-hot agony exploded behind her eyes. Elena's scream was silent. She didn't have enough air left in her damaged lungs. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her completely were the steady, thunderous beating of the Alpha King's heart against her ear, the warmth radiating from his body, and his voice rough and certain whispering into the dawn. "Let them think you're dead, little wolf. Let them celebrate. Let them feel safe, because when you wake up, the girl they killed will be gone. Only the predator will remain, and I'm going to teach you how to hunt." Then the darkness took her, dragging her down into unconsciousness. But this time, it wasn't the darkness of death. It was the darkness of transformation. When Elena next surfaced from the black, everything was different. She wasn't on the riverbank anymore. She was lying in something impossibly soft, a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. High thread count sheets, silk against her skin. The scent was different, too. Antiseptic mixed with cedarwood and that wild, nameless smell she now recognized as Theron. She tried to open her eyes and found she could both of them this time. The swelling had gone down. A dull ache remained, but the excruciating pain had been muted to something almost bearable. The room around her was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a dense forest shrouded in perpetual fog. The walls were dark wood paneling, minimal furniture, all of it expensive and masculine. A fireplace crackled in the corner, providing warmth. "Don't try to sit up," a new voice commanded. Elena turned her head carefully. A man in a white coat stood beside the bed, adjusting an IV drip connected to her arm. He was older, maybe 60, with silver-rimmed spectacles and kind but weary eyes. "I'm Dr. Bennett," he said, pulling up a chair, "royal physician to the Shadowland Pack. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. "Where?" Elena's voice came out as a croak. Her throat was raw. Dr. Bennett held up a hand, then offered her a cup of water with a straw. She sipped gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her damaged throat. "You're in the Alpha King's private residence," Bennett explained, making notes on a tablet. "North Tower, guest suite, or prisoner suite, depending on how you look at it. The king brought you in yesterday morning, half dead and completely hypothermic." He set down the tablet and fixed her with a serious look. "You have 3 broken ribs, 2 on the left side, 1 on the right, fractured tibia, dislocated shoulder, which I've reset, severe hypothermia, which we've treated, concussion, multiple lacerations and contusions, internal bruising to your liver and kidneys, though thankfully no ruptures." He paused, letting the extent of her injuries sink in. "It is a genuine miracle you're not paralyzed or dead. The fall alone should have killed you. The river definitely should have finished the job." His expressions softened slightly. "Someone up there must have plans for you. How long?" Elena swallowed hard. "How long until I can walk?" "Walk? With physical therapy, maybe 6 weeks. Fight?" Bennett raised an eyebrow. 3 months minimum, and that's being optimistic." Elena's heart sank. 3 months. Damien would be fully established as Alpha by then. Vivienne would be showing her pregnancy. They would have moved on completely, thinking her dead and forgotten. "Where is he?" she asked. "The king?" "In the council chamber," Bennett replied, standing and checking her vitals one more time. "He's been pacing for hours, waiting for you to wake. Most unsettling behavior, actually. He doesn't usually bring home strays." Before Elena could respond, the door opened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Theron Nightshade filled the doorway, and even dressed in simple black tactical pants and a dark Henley, he was overwhelming. His violet eyes locked onto her immediately, and that strange electricity sparked again, making her skin tingle. Dr. Bennett bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect, and quickly excused himself, leaving them alone. Theron pulled a steel chair to the side of the bed, with a screech of metal on wood, and sat down. He didn't speak immediately, just studied her with those intense, ancient eyes. The silence stretched until Elena couldn't bear it anymore. "Why?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. "Why save me?" "Why what?" His tone was carefully neutral. "Why save me? You said yourself I was trespassing. You said the penalty is death. You could have ended me right there on the riverbank. Why bring me here? Why heal me?" Theron leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured. "When I touched you in the woods, I felt something. A spark. Do you know what that is?" Elena shook her head. "It's called resonance," Theron explained. "It happens rarely, maybe once in 1,000 encounters. It means your wolf isn't dead, Elena. It's dormant, deeply, deeply dormant, buried so far down you can't reach it. But it's there." "I'm latent," Elena said bitterly, the familiar shame washing over her. That's why Damien, you're not latent." Theron's voice was firm, commanding. "You're blocked. Someone put a suppressor on your blood line when you were young. A curse, or more likely a poison, something designed to keep your wolf caged." Elena stared at him. "That's impossible. My parents would never." Your parents were likely protecting you, Theron interrupted. Or someone else was hiding you. Because the energy I felt when we touched. His violet eyes bored into hers. It isn't beta blood. It isn't even alpha blood. It's older, much older. He stood up and walked to the window, his broad back to her, as he looked out at his territory. You have the blood of the first lichens in your veins, Elena. The original shifters, before the bloodlines were diluted. If you shift when you shift, you will be stronger than Damien Cross, stronger than Vivian Blackthorn, possibly. He turned back to face her, a match for me. Elena's mind reeled. Ancient blood? Original lichens? It was impossible. The Ashford line was old, yes, but not that old. They were common pack members, farmers and craftsmen, not royalty. So, that's why you saved me, she said slowly, understanding dawning. To use me as a weapon. Something flickered in Theron's eyes. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment, but it was gone too quickly to identify. I saved you because I hate waste, he said, his voice going cold again. And I saved you because I saw fire in your eyes when you said you wanted to destroy them. Raw, undiluted hatred. That kind of rage, it can move mountains or bring down kingdoms. He walked back to the bed and placed both hands on the railing, trapping her in his gaze. I can heal your body, Elena. I can break whatever block is suppressing your wolf. I can train you to fight, to hunt, to kill, without hesitation or mercy. I can forge you into a weapon so sharp that when you finally face Damien Cross again, he'll piss himself before you even touch him. He leaned closer, and Elena's breath caught. But there is always a price, Theron said softly, dangerously. Once you're strong, once you've taken everything I'm offering, you will owe me. You will be my soldier, my weapon. And when I point you at an enemy, you will not hesitate. You will not question. You will strike. Do you understand? Elena thought of Damien's hands on her shoulders, pushing her into the void. She thought of Vivian's triumphant smile. She thought of dying alone in the mud, erased and forgotten, like she'd never mattered at all. She met Theron's violet gaze without flinching. I understand, she said, and I accept. Theron's mouth curved into that predatory smile again. Good. Then rest now, Elena Ashford. Because tomorrow, Dr. Bennett breaks your bones to reset them properly. He straightened up and headed for the door. And after that, his voice carried back to her. The real pain begins. Chapter 3. The burning. The next 6 months were not a recovery. They were a demolition and reconstruction of everything Elena thought she knew about pain, endurance, and herself. Dr. Bennett discovered the source of Elena's suppression on day 3. It required extensive blood work, tissue samples, and consultations with ancient texts that hadn't been opened in decades. When he finally had his answer, the fury that rolled off Theron Nightshade was so intense that windows cracked in their frames, and every wolf within a mile radius of the castle dropped to their bellies in instinctive submission. Wolfsbane derivative, Bennett explained, his hands shaking slightly as he showed them the test results in Theron's study. Specifically, a rare neurotoxin extracted from Aconitum lycoctonum, the original wolfsbane, not the common garden variety. It's been modified, refined, concentrated. Elena sat in a leather chair by the fireplace, still too weak to stand for long periods. Her ribs were healing, but every breath was still a conscious effort. I don't understand. Wolfsbane is poison. It should have killed me. This version doesn't kill, Bennett said grimly. It's far more insidious. It targets the neural pathways that connect human consciousness to wolf spirit. It severs the bond without destroying either side. You remain alive, functional, but completely unable to access your wolf. And someone has been dosing her with this for how long? Theron's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Bennett consulted his notes. Based on the concentration in her bone marrow and the calcification patterns in her neural tissue, I'd estimate 15 to 18 years. Since she was a small child, the room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Elena felt numb, detached. like she was hearing about someone else's life. 18 years. Her entire childhood, her adolescence, her young adulthood, all of it stolen by slow, deliberate poisoning. Who, she whispered, who would do this to me? Someone with access to your food or drink, Bennett said. Someone you trusted implicitly, and someone with extensive knowledge of rare toxins and wolf physiology. This isn't something a layperson could create or administer. This required expertise. Theron moved to the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the gray afternoon light. The elders of Silverpine knew what she was, he said, his voice resonant with certainty. They feared an ancient bloodline female would threaten their patriarchal power structure, so they crippled her, kept her weak and dependent. He turned back to face them, and his violet eyes were blazing. They created the very narrative they wanted, the latent wolf, the genetic dead end, the girl not worthy of being Luna, and everyone believed it because they'd been conditioning the pack to see her that way for nearly 2 decades. Elena felt something hot and violent rising in her chest. Not just anger, rage. Pure, crystalline, focused hatred for every person who had smiled at her while slowly destroying her from the inside. "Can you remove it?" she asked Bennett, her voice steadier now. "Can you fix what they did?" Bennett grimaced. "Remove it?" "Yes. Fix it? That's more complicated. The toxin has to be flushed from your system through chelation therapy. It's going to be." He searched for the right word. "Unpleasant." "How unpleasant?" Elena pressed. The doctor exchanged a glance with Theron. "The process will feel like fire in your veins. Your body will try to reject the treatment. You'll experience fever, convulsions, hallucinations. We'll have to restrain you so you don't hurt yourself during the worst of it. And it will take weeks, possibly months, to fully cleanse your system." "Do it," Elena said immediately. "Elena," Bennett started. "Do it," she repeated, her voice harder now. "I've spent 18 years being weak. I'm done. Whatever it takes, Dr. Bennett, start the treatment." Theron studied her from across the room, and for the first time since she'd met him, something like approval softened his harsh features. "You're certain? There's no shame in taking more time to heal from your injuries first." Elena met his violet gaze unflinchingly. "Every day I wait is another day Damien and Vivian think they won. Another day they feel safe. I want to start now." That predatory smile curved Theron's mouth. "Then we begin tomorrow." They started the chelation therapy at dawn. Dr. Bennett inserted an IV into Elena's arm and began the slow drip of the treatment solution, a cocktail of chelating agents, antitoxins, and what he described as aggressive cellular cleansers. For the first hour, nothing happened. Elena lay in the medical suite, watching the clear liquid flow into her veins, wondering if maybe it wouldn't be as bad as they'd warned. Then the fire started. It began in her arm, at the IV site, a warmth that quickly became uncomfortable heat. The heat spread up her arm to her shoulder, then across her chest like spilled gasoline igniting. Within minutes, every vein in her body felt like it was filled with molten metal. Elena gasped, her back arching off the medical bed. "It burns," she managed through gritted teeth. Oh, God, it burns." "I know," Bennett said, his voice professionally calm, even as he quickly secured restraints around her wrists and ankles. "That's the chelating agents binding to the toxin and pulling it out of your cells. Your body is fighting back. Try to breathe through it." Breathing was impossible. The fire intensified, spreading to every nerve ending, every cell, every molecule of her being. Elena screamed, a raw sound torn from somewhere primal. Her body convulsed against the restraints, muscles seizing and releasing in rapid succession. The door opened, and Theron entered, his expression grim. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down without a word. "You don't have to stay," Elena panted between waves of agony. Sweat was already soaking through her hospital gown. "I know you have other responsibilities." "I stay," Theron said simply. It wasn't up for debate. The hours that followed were a descent into hell. The fire in her veins gave way to chills so intense. Her teeth chattered violently, then back to burning. Her fever spiked to dangerous levels. Bennett kept a cold compress on her forehead, constantly replacing it as it heated to body temperature within minutes. She vomited repeatedly until there was nothing left. Then dry heaved until her throat was raw. The hallucinations started on day 2. Elena saw her parents, dead since she was 10 in that suspicious car accident, standing at the foot of her bed, their faces twisted in disappointment. "You were supposed to be special," her mother's ghost whispered. "We died protecting your secret, and you couldn't even shift. They're not real." Theron's voice cut through the nightmare. His large hand found hers, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "Elena, focus on my voice. They're not real, but they felt real. Everything felt real and wrong and impossible all at once." On day 4, she tried to claw the IV out of her arm, convinced it was a snake pumping venom into her body. Theron had to physically hold her down while Bennett sedated her. On day 7, she stopped recognizing people. Theron became Damien in her fevered mind. She screamed at him, begged him not to push her, pleaded for mercy that would never come. "I'm not him," Theron said over and over, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Elena, I'm not him. You're safe. You're here. You're going to survive this." Through it all, through the worst moments when she was certain she would die, when the pain was so intense she wanted to die, Theron stayed. He never left the medical suite. He slept in the chair beside her bed. He held her hand through the convulsions and talked her through the hallucinations, and caught her when she thrashed so violently she nearly fell off the bed despite the restraints. On day 14, the fever broke. Elena woke to pale morning light streaming through the windows. The fire in her veins was gone. The hallucinations had stopped. She felt weak, wrung out, but clear in a way she'd never experienced before. Like someone had wiped dirt from a window she'd been looking through her entire life. Theron was asleep in the chair, his head tilted back at an uncomfortable angle, dark circles under his eyes. His hand was still wrapped around hers. "You stayed," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. Theron's eyes opened immediately, snapping from sleep to full alertness in an instant. He sat up, studying her face with those intense violet eyes. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a truck," Elena admitted. "But different, better, clearer." Bennett bustled in, alerted by monitors that showed her vitals had stabilized. He ran a series of tests, drew blood, checked her neural responses with a series of lights and reflex hammers. Finally, he sat back with a tired smile. "The toxin levels in your bloodstream have dropped by 93%. Your neural pathways are beginning to regenerate. Elena, I think we did it. Your wolf should start to surface within the next few weeks." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, the first tears she'd shed since arriving at Shadowland that weren't from physical pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you, I couldn't have. You could have." Theron interrupted, standing up and rolling his shoulders to work out the kinks from 2 weeks of sleeping in a chair. "You're stronger than you know. The treatment just revealed what was already there." He moved to the door, then paused. "Rest today. Tomorrow we start physical training." "Tomorrow?" Bennett protested. "She needs at least a week to recover from the chelation process." "Tomorrow," Theron repeated, his tone brooking no argument. He looked at Elena. "You said you wanted to start immediately. Did you mean it?" Elena pushed herself up to sitting, ignoring the way her muscles trembled with the effort. "I meant it. Good. That dangerous smile again. Tomorrow morning. 6 Caxed, the training courtyard. Don't be late." Elena wasn't late. She arrived at the training courtyard at precisely 6 a.m., dressed in the simple black training clothes that had been left in her room. Her body still ached from the chelation and her injuries, though healing with supernatural speed, now that the toxin was gone, still made certain movements painful. but she'd be damned if she showed weakness. The courtyard was a massive outdoor space carved from gray stone, surrounded by high walls. Training equipment lined the perimeter: weights, punching bags, weapons racks, sparring dummies. The ground was packed dirt and sand, designed to cushion falls. Theron was already there, dressed in fitted black training gear that displayed the full intimidating scope of his physique. He was wrapping his hands with athletic tape, moving with the casual grace of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. "You came," he said, not looking up from his hands. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might be smart enough to take the rest your body needs." He finished rapping and finally looked at her. But intelligence and stubbornness rarely coexist. Elena bristled. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running on spite and pride." Theron crossed the courtyard to stand in front of her. But spite and pride can be useful fuel if channeled correctly. "So, let's see what you're working with." He gestured to the open space. "Attack me." Elena blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Use whatever you've got. Attack me with the intention to hurt me." "I can't. I'm not trained." "Exactly." Theron's voice was cold, clinical. "You're not trained. You've spent your entire life being told you're weak, that you're broken, that you don't belong, and part of you still believes it. So, prove me wrong. Attack me." Elena felt anger kindle in her chest. She stepped forward and threw a punch, awkward, telegraphed, all arm and no body weight behind it. Theron didn't even bother to block it. He simply moved his head 6 inches to the left and her fist sailed past his ear. "Pathetic," he said flatly. Again. Elena threw another punch. He caught her wrist mid-swing, twisted her arm behind her back, and had her face first against the stone wall before she could even process the movement. "You're fighting like a human." He growled in her ear, his body pressed against her back, using his weight to pin her. "Stop thinking, feel. The wolf is instinct, it's hunger. Find the hunger, Elena." He released her. Elena spun around. And this time the anger was real, hot, bubbling up from somewhere deep. She attacked again, multiple strikes, trying to be unpredictable. Theron blocked them all with minimal effort, but she noticed he had to actually move now. She was getting faster. Better, he acknowledged, but still too controlled. "You're afraid of hurting me." "You're the Alpha King," Elena panted. "I couldn't hurt you if I tried." "Probably not." Theron agreed with infuriating calm. "But you're not even trying. You're pulling your punches. You're still that good little pack girl who was taught to be polite, to not make waves, to not take up space." He moved closer, invading her personal space. "Damien pushed you off a cliff, Elena. He tried to murder you. Vivian, your best friend, helped him plan it. And you're still trying to play by the rules they taught you?" Something in Elena's chest cracked. The anger became rage. The rage became fury. She didn't think. She just moved. She drove her knee toward his groin. Theron blocked it, but barely. She followed with an elbow toward his throat. He caught her arm, but she used his grip as leverage to pivot and sweep his legs. It didn't work. He was too heavy, too stable, but the attempt was vicious. "There she is," Theron said, and there was something almost like pride in his voice. "There's the predator." They fought for another hour. Elena didn't land a single solid hit, but by the end she was moving faster, striking harder, reacting on instinct rather than thought. When Theron finally called a halt, she was drenched in sweat, gasping for air, her muscles screaming. "Tomorrow," Theron said, barely winded, "we do it again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until your body remembers what your wolf already knows. You were built to fight." The training became Elena's entire world. 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Hand-to-hand combat with Theron. 8 to 9, breakfast and recovery. 9 to noon, strength training and conditioning. Noon to 1, lunch. 1 to 4, weapons training. Everything from traditional blades to modern firearms. 4 to 6, endurance runs through the forest. 6, to 7, dinner. 7 to 9, tactical studies, learning pack hierarchies, territorial law, combat strategy. 9 p.m., collapse into bed. Repeat. Every day, Elena got a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. The broken bones healed completely. The dislocated shoulder regained full range of motion. The bruises faded, and underneath it all, something else was waking up. She started noticing things she'd never noticed before. Her sense of smell sharpened. She could identify people by scent from 50 yards away. Her hearing became acute enough to pick up conversations through closed doors. Her night vision improved dramatically. Food tasted more intense. Colors seemed brighter, and the hunger Theron kept talking about, she felt it now. A restlessness under her skin, an itching need to run, to hunt, to chase. Her wolf was stirring, pushing against the barriers that had held it down for so long. 3 months into training, something shifted. Elena was sparring with Theron, moving through combinations they'd drilled 1,000 times. She threw a cross, he blocked. She followed with a hook, he ducked. She aimed a kick at his ribs, and suddenly she was fast. Not human fast. Not even alpha fast. She was moving at a speed that blurred the edges of the world. Her kick connected with Theron's ribs before he could react. The impact sent him staggering back 3 steps. They both froze. Theron looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine surprise in his violet eyes. He rubbed his ribs experimentally, then smiled that dangerous, predatory smile that still made her heart skip. "Well," he said softly, "she wakes." That night, under the light of a full moon streaming through Elena's bedroom window, the fever hit. It wasn't the sickness of the poison. This was different. This was a burning that started in her marrow and radiated outward, consuming everything in its path. Elena's bones began to crack, to reshape, to elongate. She fell to the floor screaming as her spine extended, her jaw reformed, her hands twisted into something new. The door burst open. Theron was there in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her. "Let it happen," he commanded, his voice taking on the alpha tone that compelled obedience. "Don't fight it, Elena. Accept the power. Accept what you are." Fur erupted from Elena's skin, white as fresh snow, but tipped with silver that seemed to catch and reflect the moonlight. Her muzzle lengthened, her teeth sharpened. Her human hands became powerful paws tipped with deadly claws. With a final bone-shattering crack, the transformation completed. Standing in place of the girl was a wolf. But not just any wolf. Elena was massive, easily the size of a female alpha, possibly larger. Her coat was pristine white, fading to silver at the tips, making her look like she was carved from moonlight itself. And her eyes, when she finally opened them, glowed with electric blue fire. The white wolf threw back her head and howled. It was a sound of pain and triumph, of sorrow and joy, of death and rebirth. A sound that echoed across the mountains, carrying for miles, reaching all the way to the borders of Silverpine Pack territory. In his new office, going through late-night paperwork, Alpha Damian Cross heard that howl. He paused, his pen hovering over a treaty document. Something about that sound made his blood run cold, made his wolf whimper and tuck its tail. He shook off the feeling and went back to work, dismissing it as paranoia. He should have listened to his instincts. Back in Shadowland, Theron stood slowly, his own beast pushing at the surface in response to the power, radiating from Elena's wolf. His eyes glowed bright violet as he regarded the white wolf before him. "Beautiful," he murmured, "and terrifying." The white wolf looked at him with those electric blue eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lowered her head, not in submission, but in respect, in acknowledgement. Theron reached out and placed his hand on her massive head, his fingers sinking into impossibly soft fur. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "We've been waiting for you." The white wolf huffed in response, a sound that might have been agreement or amusement. Then she threw back her head and howled again, a declaration of war. Let them hear her coming. Let Damien and Vivian know that death was on its way. Elena Ashford was dead. The White Wolf had risen to take her place, and blood was about to be paid. Chapter 4. The Summit. The invitation arrived on midnight black parchment, sealed with the gold wax emblem of the High Council, a wolf's head surrounded by 7 stars, representing the 7 founding packs of the Northern Territories. The paper itself seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the calligraphy was done in actual gold ink that shimmered when it caught the firelight. Elena stood in Theron's study, reading the formal script over his shoulder. The scent of him, pine and smoke, and that indefinable wildness had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over the past 6 months. The Winter Solstice Summit, she read aloud. To be held in the citadel of Valoria on the eve of the longest night, all pack leaders and their chosen delegates are required to attend to renew territorial treaties and resolve outstanding disputes. Theron sat behind his massive oak desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He'd been staring at the invitation for the past 10 minutes with an expression Elena had learned to recognize as strategic calculation. They'll be there, he said finally. Not a question. Damien and Vivian. Elena's voice was steady, but her hand clenched into a fist at her side. He's officially alpha now. His father died 3 weeks ago. I'm aware. Theron's violet eyes flicked up to meet hers. My intelligence network reported that Gideon Cross suffered a sudden heart attack in his sleep. Convenient timing, given that he'd been expressing concerns about Damien's leadership capabilities to the Elder Council. Elena's eyes widened. You think Damien killed his own father? I think, Theron said carefully, that Damien Cross is willing to remove anyone who stands between him and absolute power, his father, his former mate. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. Yes, they'll be at the summit. Damien needs to establish himself among the other pack leaders, and Vivian will be at his side playing the devoted Luna. Is she actually pregnant? Elena asked, surprised by how little emotion the question stirred in her now. 6 months ago, the thought would have destroyed her. Now it was simply tactical information. My sources say no. Theron's mouth curved into a cold smile. She announced a miscarriage 6 weeks ago. Very tragic, very timely, considering she was never actually pregnant to begin with. She bought herself time to solidify her position, and now she can claim trauma as an excuse for not immediately producing an heir. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the perpetual fog that shrouded Shadowland. Her reflection in the glass showed someone she barely recognized. The fragile girl from 6 months ago had been burned away, replaced by someone harder, stronger, dangerous. Her white blonde hair was longer now, falling past her shoulders in waves. Her body had transformed from soft to lethal, all lean muscle and controlled power. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. They held a coldness that hadn't been there before, a predator's patience. When I see them, Elena said quietly, I'm going to want to shift. I'm going to want to rip out Vivian's throat and make Damien watch. Then I'm going to want to do the same to him. I know. Theron stood and crossed to stand behind her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, but he didn't touch her. He never touched her anymore, not since the night she'd shifted for the first time. Something had changed between them that night, something neither of them had acknowledged. But you won't. Elena turned to face him. Why not? Because violence is forbidden at the summit on penalty of pack exile and execution, Theron said. The citadel of Valoria is neutral ground, protected by ancient magic and blood oaths older than any living wolf. If you attack them there, you'll be the one who suffers. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the first time he touched her in weeks. The contact sent electricity dancing across her skin, just like it had on the riverbank. Besides, he continued, his voice dropping lower, death would be too easy, too quick, too merciful. What I have in mind for them is far worse than a quick kill in a ballroom. Elena's breath caught. What do you have in mind? Theron's smile was absolutely wicked. We're going to destroy them slowly, publicly. We're going to let them see you alive, powerful, beautiful, and completely out of their reach. We're going to make them doubt everything. Make them paranoid. Make them wonder how much you know and who you've told. He moved past her to a cabinet and pulled out a velvet box. Tonight, we play with their minds. We plant seeds of doubt. We watch them crumble from the inside. He opened the box, revealing a necklace that made Elena's breath catch. It was a choker of black diamonds, each stone perfectly cut and radiating dark fire. At the center hung a pendant, a raw, unpolished piece of moonstone the size of a quail's egg that seemed to glow with its own inner light. This is the Nightshade Sigil, Theron explained. It marks the wearer as under my personal protection, as part of my inner circle. His violet eyes met hers, intense and unreadable. As mine. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them would voice. Wearing this will confuse them. Theron continued, his voice carefully neutral again. They think you're dead. They'll see you alive, transformed, beautiful, and wearing the mark of the most powerful alpha in the territories. It will terrify them. They'll wonder what you've told me, what alliances you've made, what plans we've set in motion. Elena nodded slowly. Psychological warfare, the best kind. Theron moved behind her. May I? Elena lifted her hair, exposing the vulnerable curve of her neck. Theron's fingers were warm as he fastened the clasp, his touch lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. The weight of the necklace settled against her throat, substantial but not uncomfortable. The moonstone pendant rested just above her collarbone, and she could swear she felt it pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Perfect, Theron murmured, his breath ghosting across the shell of her ear. You look like a queen. Elena met his eyes in the window's reflection. I thought I was your weapon. Can't you be both? His smile was dangerous and beautiful. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Pack formal attire. The summit is as much about appearances as politics. And Elena? His expression turned serious. No. Know what they say or do. You stay in control. We're playing a long game here. Understood? Understood, Elena agreed. But inside her wolf stirred and snarled, hungry for blood. The convoy of black vehicles that comprised the Shadowland delegation departed at first light. Elena rode in the lead SUV with Theon, while his elite guard, 6 of his strongest warriors, followed in 2 additional vehicles. The drive to Valoria would take most of the day, cutting through mountain passes and ancient forests that existed in a perpetual state of twilight. Elena wore traveling clothes, black tactical pants, boots, and a fitted leather jacket, but her formal gown hung in a garment bag in the back. She'd seen it when Theon's staff had delivered it yesterday. Silver silk that looked like liquid metal, with a slit up to mid-thigh and a back cut so low it was nearly scandalous. It was a dress designed to make a statement, to command attention, to make Damien Cross choke on his regrets. Tell me about Valoria, Elena said, as they wound through the mountain roads. She'd never been to the neutral city pack. Members of her status weren't invited to summit events. Theon kept his eyes on the road, but she could tell he was pleased by the question. He'd been training her in politics and pack dynamics along with combat skills. Valoria is the oldest city in the Northern Territories, he began. It was founded by the First Lycan Council over 1,000 years ago as a place where disputes could be settled without bloodshed. The city itself is built on a convergence of ley lines, natural channels of magical energy. That energy powers the protection spells that make violence impossible within city limits. Impossible? Elena questioned. Not just forbidden? Impossible, Theon confirmed. If you try to shift with intent to harm, your wolf is suppressed. If you try to strike someone in anger, your muscles lock up. The magic is absolute. It's the only reason packs with centuries-old blood feuds can occupy the same space without immediate warfare. Elena absorbed this. So, we really can't touch them? Not physically, but words can wound just as deeply. Sometimes more so. Theon glanced at her. You've gotten very good at finding people's pressure points during your tactical training. Tonight, you use those skills. They arrived in Valoria as the sun was setting, painting the marble city in shades of gold and crimson. The architecture was breathtaking, soaring spires, intricate archways, buildings that looked like they'd been carved from single pieces of stone rather than constructed. Everything gleamed, pristine and timeless. The summit venue was the Grand Citadel, a palace of white marble and gold that dominated the city's highest point. Theon's delegation was shown to a suite of rooms in the East Wing, lavish accommodations befitting his status as Alpha King. You have 2 hours to prepare, Theon said as staff members unpacked their bags and laid out their formal attire. The opening reception begins at sunset. That's where we'll make our entrance. Elena nodded and retreated to her assigned room to transform herself from warrior to weapon of a different kind. 2 hours later, Elena stood in front of a full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The silver dress fit like it had been painted on her body, highlighting every curve that 6 months of brutal training had sculpted. Her white blonde hair had been styled in soft waves that cascaded over one shoulder, leaving the other bare to showcase the nightshade sigil at her throat. Her makeup was subtle but devastating. Smoky eyes that made the blue seem even more electric, lips painted a shade that looked like dark wine. She looked dangerous, powerful, nothing like the broken girl Damien had pushed off a cliff. A knock at the door. "It's time," Theon's voice called. Elena took a deep breath, channeling the wolf's confidence into her human form, and opened the door. Theon stood in the hallway wearing a black suit so perfectly tailored, it looked like a shadow given form. His dark hair was pulled back, exposing the sharp angles of his face. His violet eyes widened fractionally when he saw her. The first genuine surprise she'd seen from him in weeks. "You look," he trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "Lethal." Elena smiled. "Good." Theon offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric. "Remember," he said as they walked toward the grand ballroom, "we're here to observe and unsettle. Let them come to us. Let them make the first move." "And if they don't approach us?" Elena asked. "They will," Theon said with absolute certainty. "Curiosity will eat them alive. They'll have to know who you are and how you survived." The doors to the grand ballroom were 20 feet tall, carved from ancient oak and inlaid with gold. 2 guards, neutral wolves sworn to the council, pulled them open as Theon and Elena approached. The noise of the reception washed over them. Hundreds of conversations, the clink of crystal glasses, the subtle undercurrent of power that came from having so many dominant wolves in one space. The ballroom itself was spectacular. Vaulted ceilings painted with constellations, massive chandeliers dripping with crystals, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city below. The crowd was a sea of designer gowns and expensive suits. Each pack's colors and symbols displayed with varying degrees of subtlety. Elena recognized banners from packs she'd only heard about in stories. The Ironwood pack from the eastern forests, the Stormcrest pack from the northern tundra, the Crimson Fang pack from the southern deserts. And there, near the center of the room, standing beside a buffet table laden with delicacies, were Damien and Vivian. Damien looked older than Elena remembered. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his formal tuxedo, while expensive, hung a bit loosely on his frame, as if he'd lost weight. He was holding a glass of wine with a white-knuckled grip, laughing at something another alpha was saying. But the laugh didn't reach his eyes. Beside him, Vivian wore a gaudy red satin gown that was cut too low and adorned with too many jewels. She was rubbing her flat stomach, ostentatiously performative grief for the child that had never existed. But Elena's enhanced senses picked up something the older would have missed. Vivian smelled wrong, stressed. The scent-masking herbs she'd used couldn't quite cover the chemical tang of anxiety. "Ready?" Theon murmured. Elena lifted her chin. "Let's make an entrance." They descended the grand staircase into the ballroom. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Every dominant wolf in the room felt Theon's power like a physical pressure, and instinct made them look. But it was Elena they stared at. Whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Who is that? I've never seen her before. Look at the necklace she's wearing, the nightshade sigil. Is she the Alpha King's mate? She's stunning." Theon led Elena through the crowd, with the effortless confidence of someone who'd been doing this for centuries. Lesser alphas dipped their heads in respect as he passed. Beatus scrambled to get out of his way, and Elena, on his arm, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her, wondering about her, trying to determine her place in the pack hierarchy. They made their way toward the section where the most powerful alphas congregated, the inner circle of wolves, who actually made decisions rather than just following them, and that path led them directly past Damien and Vivian. Theon, as if suddenly noticing them, paused. "Alpha Cross," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby, but not so loud as to draw attention. "I heard about your father's passing. My condolences." Damien turned, and the moment his eyes registered Theon, his face went too quickly and offered a deep bow. "King Theon, I'm honored. Thank you for your condolences. My father's death was unexpected." "I'm sure it was," Theon said with absolutely no inflection, leaving it ambiguous whether it was sympathy or accusation. Damien's eyes flicked to Elena, drawn by the same magnetic pull that was affecting everyone else in the room. He looked at her face, and she saw recognition flicker. She had the same bone structure, the same basic features as the girl he'd known. But the similarity stopped there. The Elena he'd known was soft, uncertain, forgettable. The woman before him was carved from ice and moonlight, dripping in diamonds that cost more than his entire pack house. "I don't believe we've met," Damien said slowly, his voice uncertain. "I'm Alpha Damien Cross of the Silverpine Pack." Elena let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable before offering her hand. "Elena Ashford," she said clearly. No title, no pack affiliation, just her name, the name of the girl he'd murdered. Damien's face went from pale to ashen. The wine glass he'd set down tipped over, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. His hand shook as he reached for hers, but he didn't take it. He just stared, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "Are you quite all right, Alpha Cross?" Theon asked with false concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Vivian pushed forward, her amber eyes narrowing with suspicion and jealousy. "Elena Ashford," she said, her voice sharp. "That's an interesting name. We had a pack member with that name. She died tragically several months ago, fell off a cliff during a storm." Elena met Vivian's gaze without flinching, and she let just a hint of blue fire flash in her eyes, a wolf's eyes in a human face, visible only for a second. "How terrible," she said, her voice cool and smooth. "I'm sure her death weighs heavily on those responsible." The emphasis on responsible was subtle but unmistakable. Vivian's face hardened. It was an accident. A tragedy. She was troubled. Couldn't shift. "We all tried to help her, but I've heard that story." Elena interrupted, her smile sharp as broken glass. The troubled girl who couldn't shift. The sympathetic pack that tried so hard to help. The tragic accident that was so very convenient for those who benefited from her death. She stepped closer to Vivian, invading her personal space in a way that made the other woman instinctively retreat. "But I wonder, do you think the dead stay dead? Do you think betrayal goes unpunished? Do you think gravity is the only thing that doesn't lie?" The last phrase, The exact words from the moment Damien had pushed her hit its mark. Damien stumbled backward, actually stumbling, his face a mask of terror. "It's not possible," he whispered. You can't be. Can't be what?" Elena asked innocently. "Alive? Powerful? Standing here wearing the mark of the Alpha King, while you barely hold together a territory that's rotting from the inside out." Theron placed a possessive hand on the small of Elena's back. "Careful, my dear," he said, though his eyes gleamed with approval. "You're being rude to our hosts. My apologies," Elena said, not sounding apologetic at all. She looked directly at Damien. "It's just that I have very little patience for weak leaders who make tragic mistakes. Don't you agree, Alpha Cross?" Damien couldn't speak. He was hyperventilating, his eyes wild, looking between Elena and Theron like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "We should go," Vivian hissed, grabbing Damien's arm. "You need air. You've been working too hard." "Oh, I don't think it's overwork," Elena said pleasantly. "I think it's guilt. Guilt is such a heavy burden, isn't it? It keeps you up at night, makes you see things that aren't there, makes you paranoid, makes you wonder if that tragic accident you arranged was quite as final as you thought." She leaned in close enough to whisper, her voice audible only to Damien and Vivian. "Sleep well, Alpha Cross. Try not to have nightmares about cliffs and rivers and the wolves who don't stay dead." Then she straightened, smiled brilliantly, and took Theron's arm. "Shall we, my lord? I believe the Eastern delegation wanted to meet you." As they walked away, leaving Damien and Vivian in the wreckage of their composure, Elena heard Damien's desperate whisper. "It was her. I know it was her. Those eyes, her voice, it's Elena. Elena is dead." Vivian hissed back. "You're being paranoid. That's just some woman with the same name. It's a coincidence. There are no coincidences." Damien's voice was rising, attracting attention. "She knows. She knows everything. How else would she know about the cliff? About gravity?" Their voices faded as Elena and Theron moved deeper into the crowd. "You did well," Theron murmured in her ear. "Very well, you planted the seeds perfectly. Now we let them grow." Elena smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. "That felt better than I expected. Revenge always does," Theron said. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Tomorrow is the ceremonial hunt. That's where things get interesting." "What happens in the hunt?" Elena asked. Theron's smile was absolutely predatory. "You'll see. But I suggest you get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow you're going to need all your strength." As the reception continued around them, Elena felt her wolf stirring beneath her skin, eager and hungry. She caught one last glimpse of Damien across the ballroom. He was being led away by Vivian, looking over his shoulder at Elena with the wide-eyed terror of a man who just realized his past had caught up with him. Good, Elena thought viciously. Let him be afraid. Let him lie awake tonight wondering if she was real or a hallucination. Let him doubt everything, because tomorrow in the woods, she was going to show him exactly how real she was, and exactly how big a mistake he'd made. Chapter 5. The Hunt. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of rain against the windows. For a disorienting moment, she was back on Widow's Peak, standing in the storm with Damien's cold eyes watching her fall. Then reality reasserted itself. She was in Valoria, in a bed that cost more than most people's houses, and the girl who had fallen was dead. The predator who'd risen in her place stretched and rose. The traditional hunt was scheduled to begin at first light. Elena, dressed in the provided gear, black leather hunting pants that allowed full range of motion, a fitted tactical vest, and boots designed for both running and combat. A compound bow was waiting for her, along with a quiver of arrows, though she knew her real weapon was the beast beneath her skin. Theron was already in the common area of their suite, studying a topographical map of the hunting grounds spread across the table. He looked up when she entered, his violet eyes assessing her with the critical gaze of a commander evaluating his soldier. "Sleep well?" he asked. "I dreamed of blood," Elena replied honestly. Theron's mouth curved into a dark smile. Good. Keep that edge. He gestured to the map. The hunt takes place in the Whispering Pines, 10,000 acres of old-growth forest maintained by the council specifically for this purpose. The prey is released at dawn: stags, boars, and this year, 3 convicted criminals who chose trial by hunt rather than execution. Elena raised an eyebrow. We're hunting people? Criminals who prey on pack members, Theron clarified. Rogues who've killed without cause. They're given a head start and basic supplies. If they survive until sunset, they earn exile rather than death. They never do. He pointed to a section of the map. Damien entered the deep woods section. My scouts report he's been drinking since the reception last night. He's reckless, emotional, and desperate to prove himself after your performance yesterday. He wants to kill something to remind himself he's still a man. Is he alone? Elena's voice was carefully neutral, but her wolf was already snarling, eager. Vivian is with him. She insisted on watching, presumably to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid that might damage his reputation further. They have 2 guards, but I've arranged for my men to distract them. Theron's smile was cold. The deep woods section borders Shadowland territory. If you were to cross that border during the hunt, my jurisdiction would supersede summit neutrality. Elena understood immediately. You want me to lure them onto your land. I want you to isolate them, terrify them, and break them psychologically. Theron corrected. I want Damien Cross to realize exactly what he threw away and exactly how badly he miscalculated. And then his eyes gleamed with something fierce and possessive. I want you to let them live. Death would be mercy. I want them to carry this humiliation for the rest of their lives. He moved closer, close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating from his body. But Elena, his voice dropped lower, more serious. If you get in actual danger, if they try to truly harm you, you do whatever is necessary. Your safety matters more than the plan. Understood. Something warm unfurled in Elena's chest at the genuine concern in his voice. Understood. Theron reached out and adjusted the nightshade sigil at her throat, his fingers lingering against her skin. You've become something extraordinary, he said quietly. I knew you would. I felt it that first night on the riverbank. You felt a half-dead girl covered in mud, Elena pointed out, but she didn't pull away from his touch. I felt power, Theron corrected, raw, untapped, burning beneath the surface. I felt potential, and now, his violet eyes met hers. Now I see a queen. The moment stretched between them, charged with all the things neither of them would say. Then Theron stepped back, breaking the spell. The hunt begins in 20 minutes. Take the Northwest Trail into the Whispering Pines. Trust your wolf. She knows where to go. The Whispering Pines earned their name from the way the wind moved through the ancient trees, creating sounds that were almost like voices, almost like warnings. Elena moved through the forest with supernatural grace, her enhanced senses absorbing everything: the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, the distant calls of other hunters, the scent signatures of dozens of wolves marking the territory. And underneath it all, she caught the scent she'd been tracking: Damien. Sour with fear and stale alcohol, mixed with Vivian's chemical anxiety barely masked by expensive perfume. Elena followed the trail deeper into the forest, moving silently despite the thick carpet of pine needles. She could hear them now, about half a mile ahead. Damien's voice raised in anger, Vivian's sharp responses. She closed the distance carefully, using every technique Theron had drilled into her over the past 6 months. Approach from downwind. Use the terrain for cover. Move when they're distracted. Be the shadow before you're the threat. She found them in a clearing near a rushing stream, a location that made her chest tighten with its eerie similarity to Widow's Peak. Damien was pacing, his hunting bow discarded on the ground. Vivian leaned against a tree, her arms crossed, watching him with barely concealed contempt, telling you it was her. Damien was shouting. I saw her eyes, Vivian. I know it was Elena. Elena is dead. Vivian snapped back. We watched her fall 300 feet into a river full of rocks. No one survives that. You're paranoid and drunk, and you're making us look weak in front of the other packs. She knew things. Damien spun to face her. She talked about gravity, about betrayal, about people who benefit from convenient deaths. How would some random woman know those things? Coincidence, lucky guesses, cold reading. Vivian pushed off from the tree. Or maybe, and here's a thought, maybe your guilty conscience is eating you alive and you're projecting it onto the first blonde woman who looks vaguely similar. This isn't guilt, Damien snarled. This is survival instinct. If she's alive, if she told the Alpha King what we did, then we'd already be dead. Vivian interrupted. Theron Nightshade doesn't play games. If he knew we'd murdered one of his, whatever she is to him, he would have already ripped out our throats. The fact that we're still breathing means we're safe. Elena chose that moment to step out from the tree line. You're not safe, she said clearly, her voice cutting through their argument like a blade. You've never been less safe. Both of them froze. Damien's hand went to the hunting knife at his belt. Vivian's eyes widened, darting around the clearing looking for the guards who were supposed to be nearby. They're not coming, Elena said, reading Vivian's panic. Your guards encountered some of Theron's men about a quarter-mile back. They'll be occupied for a while. She stepped further into the clearing, and the morning light filtering through the canopy illuminated her fully. Gone was the elegant woman from the reception. This was the warrior, the predator, dressed for the hunt with eyes that gleamed too bright, too blue, too knowing. You. Damien breathed. His face cycled through emotions too quickly. Shock, fear, denial, rage. It is you, Elena. But you're supposed to be dead? Elena supplied. She moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. I was. You made sure of that. Your hands on my shoulders, the push, the fall. I remember every second of it, Damien. Every single second. How? Vivian's voice came out strangled. The river, the rocks, no one could survive. I didn't survive, Elena said. The girl you killed died on those rocks. But something else woke up in her place. She let blue fire flash in her eyes. Something you should have left sleeping. Damien's denial finally cracked. He laughed, a high, desperate sound. Even if you are alive, what does it matter? You're still wolfless. You're still weak. You couldn't fight me then, and you can't fight me now. Is that what you think? Elena tilted her head, studying him like a cat studies a mouse. That I'm still that broken girl you pushed off a cliff? That 6 months of being dead and reborn changed nothing? You can't shift, Vivian said. But there was uncertainty in her voice now. We made sure of that. The wolfsbane derivatives in your food since childhood. Elena's smile was razor sharp. So you admit it, you knew. You and your father poisoned me for years. Vivian's face went pale. She'd said too much, revealed too much. Beta Hemlock and the Silverpine Elders knew what I was, Elena continued, her voice cold as winter. They knew I carried ancient bloodlines. They knew that if I shifted, I would be stronger than any of you. So they poisoned me, kept me weak, kept me obedient, kept me convinced I was broken. She took another step forward. Damien backed up, his heel catching on a root. But the poison is gone now, flushed from my system. And my wolf? She smiled, and it was not a human expression. She's awake, and she's very, very angry. Prove it. Damien spat, trying to summon bravado through his fear. If you can really shift, if you're really this powerful ancient wolf you claim to be, then prove it. Show me, gladly. Elena didn't give them time to react. She closed her eyes and pulled on the power that lived in her chest, the connection to her wolf that had been severed for so long, and was now an unbreakable bond. The transformation was instantaneous. Faster than Damien could shift, faster than Vivian could scream. One moment, a woman stood in the clearing. The next, there was an explosion of silver light, and the sound of bones restructuring that echoed like gunshots. When the light faded, the white wolf stood in Elena's place. She was enormous, standing nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, larger than any female wolf either of them had ever seen. Her coat was pristine white fading to silver at the tips, making her look like she'd been carved from moonlight and winter itself. Her eyes, those electric blue eyes, burned with intelligence and rage. Her teeth were visible, long and sharp and promising violence. Damien fell backward, scrambling away from her. "Impossible," he whispered. "You can't be." "That's not possible." The white wolf stalked toward him, each step deliberate, claws scoring deep grooves in the earth. She was massive enough that when she stood over Damien's fallen form, she blocked out the sun entirely, casting him in her shadow. A low growl rumbled from her chest, so deep and resonant it vibrated through the ground. It was the sound of an apex predator, an ancient thing, something that belonged in myths and nightmares rather than the modern world. Vivian tried to run. The white wolf was faster. She appeared in Vivian's path before the woman had taken 3 steps, moving with supernatural speed that left afterimages. Vivian screamed and fell to her knees, her hands up in a useless gesture of submission. The white wolf shifted back to human form, the transformation flowing like water. Elena stood naked in the clearing, unashamed, powerful, terrible in her beauty. She crouched down in front of Vivian, getting close enough that they were breathing the same air. "You wanted to be Luna," Elena said softly, her voice still carrying an undertone of the wolf's growl. "You wanted the power, the status, the title. You were willing to betray your best friend, help murder her, lie about a pregnancy, all for power you thought you deserved." She leaned even closer. "So look at me, Vivian. Look at real power. This is what you were trying to suppress. This is what you were afraid of." Vivian was sobbing now, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Please," she choked out. "Please." "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "You're not sorry," Elena interrupted. "You're just sorry you got caught. You're sorry your plan didn't work. You're sorry that the girl you tried to erase came back stronger than you could ever be." She stood up and walked to where Damien was, still on the ground, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. She crouched beside him, and when she spoke, her voice was ice. "You pushed me off a cliff because you thought I was weak, because your father and the elders convinced you I was worthless, because you were too much of a coward to see my value." She grabbed his chin, forcing him to meet her burning blue gaze. "But here's what you didn't know. My parents died protecting my secret. They died because Beta Hemlock discovered what I was and had their brakes cut to prevent them from taking me to healers who could break the suppression." Damien's eyes widened in horror. "Elena, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about your parents. Does it matter?" Elena asked. "You still pushed me. You still tried to kill me. You still chose power over love, over honor, over basic decency." She released him with a shove that sent him sprawling, "and now you get to live with that choice." She stood up, her body beginning to shimmer with the pre-shift glow. "I'm not going to kill you. Death would be too easy, too quick, too merciful. Instead, I'm going to let you live. I'm going to let you go back to your failing pack, to your rotting territory, to your position that's slipping through your fingers. And every day, you're going to remember this moment. You're going to remember what you threw away, what you could have had if you'd just been brave enough to fight for me instead of killing me." Damien was openly weeping now. "Please, Elena. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Give me another chance. I'll reject Vivian. I'll tell everyone the truth." You'll do nothing," Elena said coldly, "because if you breathe one word about me being alive, if you try to use this information against Theron, if you do anything except slink back to Silverpine, and pray I never think about you again." She let her eyes flash bright blue. Let the wolf rise close enough to the surface that her teeth lengthened. Her nails became claws. "I will come back. And next time I won't be interested in mercy." A twig snapped at the edge of the clearing. Theron emerged from the shadows, fully dressed, completely composed, as if he'd been watching the entire encounter. His violet swept over the scene, Elena standing naked and powerful. Damien and Vivian broken on the ground, and satisfaction curved his mouth. "I believe you've made your point," he said, moving to Elena and draping his jacket over her shoulders. The gesture was both protective and possessive. "The summit hunt is nearly over. We should return before your absence is noted." He looked down at Damien with utter contempt. Alpha Cross, a word of advice. "If you're asked about your hunt today, I suggest you claim you saw nothing of interest. Because if rumors start spreading about a white wolf in the Whispering Pines, if anyone starts asking questions about Elena Ashford being alive..." His smile was absolutely terrifying. "Well, accidents happen all the time in the wild, don't they? And I would hate for you to suffer another tragic loss. Perhaps a fatal hunting accident this time." Damien nodded frantically, unable to speak. Theron's gaze shifted to Vivian. "And you, Lady Blackthorn. I suggest you learn to control your tongue. The secret you just revealed about the poisoning, about the conspiracy, has been recorded by multiple sources. If anything happens to Elena, if any harm comes to her, or to me, that evidence will be released to all the pack leaders. You'll be tried for attempted murder of an ancient bloodline. The penalty for that is death by burning. Do you understand?" Vivian nodded, still sobbing. "Excellent." Theron wrapped an arm around Elena's shoulders and turned her toward the trail that led back to Valoria. "Come, my dear, let's leave the trash where it belongs." As they walked away, Elena heard Damien's broken whisper. "What have we done? What have we done?" "Good," she thought viciously. "Let them drown in their guilt. Let them destroy themselves from the inside out." They were halfway back to the Citadel when Elena finally spoke. "Thank you for letting me handle it my way." Theron glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't need my help. You were magnificent. Terrifying and magnificent." "I wanted to kill them," Elena admitted. "My wolf wanted blood. It took everything I had to walk away. That's what makes you dangerous." Theron said, "Not the rage. Anyone can be ruled by rage. It's the control, the discipline to choose strategy over satisfaction. That's what separates predators from monsters." They walked in silence for a moment before Theron added, "But, for what it's worth, if you had killed them, I would have supported your decision. Would have helped you hide the bodies. Would have told them the story was necessary." Elena stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why?" she asked. "Why do all of this for me? The rescue, the training, the political maneuvering. What do you get out of it, Theron?" Theron was quiet for a long moment, his violet eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. 6 months ago, I found a broken girl on a riverbank. I could have walked away. Should have. Probably. But when I touched you, when I felt that spark, something in me recognized something in you. Not just the ancient blood, not just the power. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I recognized a kindred spirit. Someone who'd been betrayed and broken and left for dead. Someone who refused to stay down. His expression grew more intense. "I've been alone for a very long time, Elena. Centuries. I've had alliances, relationships, even marriages of convenience, but I've never had an equal. Someone who could stand beside me instead of behind me. Someone who could match my strength with their own." Elena's breath caught. "Theron, I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted quickly. "I'm not demanding anything in return for what I've given you. You owe me nothing but the service we agreed upon. But I need you to know." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "You are not a weapon to me. You are not a tool, you are." A howl cut through the forest. Then another. The hunt was ending. Calling all participants back to the Citadel. Theron dropped his hand and stepped back, the moment breaking. "We should go. They'll be expecting us at the closing ceremony." Elena wanted to press, to make him finish that sentence, but she could see he'd already retreated behind his walls again. So she simply nodded and fell into step beside him. But as they walked back toward Valoria and the final summit events, Elena's mind was reeling. Not from the confrontation with Damien and Vivian that had been cathartic, but ultimately just a step in a longer plan. No, she was reeling from Theron's almost confession. From the vulnerability she'd seen in his eyes. From the realization that whatever was building between them was more than just an alliance of convenience. And from the terrifying knowledge that she was starting to feel the same way. The closing ceremony of the Winter Solstice Summit was held that evening in the Grand Ballroom. All pack leaders assembled to renew their territorial oaths and signed the updated treaties that had been negotiated over the 3-day event. Elena stood beside Theron as he signed the Shadowland Accords, presenting a unified front to the other packs. She noticed Damien and Vivian across the room, both looking haggard and defeated. Damien couldn't meet her eyes. Vivian stared at the floor. Good, Elena thought. Let them suffer. After the ceremony concluded, as pack delegations began preparing for their departures the following morning, a messenger approached Theron with an urgent missive. Elena watched his expression darken as he read it. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. "News from Silverpine," Theron said grimly. "Beta Hemlock has been found dead in his office. Apparent suicide, wolfsbane poisoning, but the circumstances are suspicious." Elena felt ice slide down her spine. Someone killed him to silence him. "That would be my assessment," Theron agreed. He looked at her seriously. "The conspiracy runs deeper than we thought. Elena Hemlock was a pawn, not the mastermind. Someone else orchestrated your suppression. Someone with more power and more to lose." "Who?" Elena demanded. "That," Theron said darkly, "is what we're going to find out. But we'll need to be in Silverpine to do it. It's time to go home." Elena's wolf stirred at the word home. Not Silverpine, that had never truly been home, but the idea of returning to confront the rest of the conspiracy. To finally get justice not just for herself, but for her parents, that resonated deep in her soul. "When do we leave?" she asked. Theron's smile was cold and dangerous. "Tomorrow. We're going to pay your old pack a visit, and this time we're not leaving until we've burned out every last bit of rot." Chapter 6. The Return. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the muddy roads leading to Silverpine territory like a funeral procession or an invading army. The distinction, Elena thought darkly, was merely a matter of perspective. Rain had returned, turning the world into varying shades of gray and brown. Elena sat in the back of the lead vehicle beside Theron, watching the landscape transform from the pristine forests of Shadowland to the deteriorating territory of her former pack. The change was stark and damning. Fields that should have been green with winter wheat were waterlogged and barren. The crops rotted in the ground. Fences sagged, broken, and unmended. The few pack members she spotted on the roadside looked gaunt, their clothes worn and dirty. One old woman watched their convoy pass with hollow eyes that held no hope, only weary resignation. "It's worse than I thought," Elena murmured, her enhanced vision picking up details she would have missed as a human. "The land is dying." "The land reflects its ruler," Theron said, his voice carrying no sympathy. "When an alpha is corrupt, when leadership is built on betrayal and murder, the territory itself rejects them. It's the oldest law of our kind, the wolf and the land are one. Poison one, poison both." He gestured to a field where diseased livestock stood in ankle-deep mud. "Damien Cross has been alpha for 3 months. In that time, crops have failed, game has migrated away, and the river," he pointed to a glimpse of the shadow vein, visible through the trees, "has turned brackish near Silverpine borders. Nature is punishing them because Damien killed his fated mate," Elena said softly. The old superstition suddenly feeling very real. "Because he murdered an ancient bloodline," Theron corrected. "The land knew what you were, even if you didn't. When Damien pushed you off that cliff, he committed an abomination. The earth itself turned against him. Elena absorbed this, feeling a grim satisfaction. Damien hadn't just failed to silence her, he'd cursed himself and everyone who followed him. The convoy rolled to a stop in front of the Silverpine pack house. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion that had been beautiful once, but now the paint was peeling. Gardens were overgrown with thorny weeds, and several windows were cracked. It looked like a corpse of a house technically standing, but fundamentally dead. "Remember the plan," Theron said, as his guards exited the vehicles and took up defensive positions. "We're here under the pretense of investigating Beta Hemlock's death and ensuring Silverpine's stability doesn't threaten regional security. But our real objective is to find out who ordered my parents killed and who orchestrated the poisoning." Elena finished, "and then make them pay." Theron's smile was sharp with approval. Exactly. The massive oak doors of the pack house opened. An elderly man in formal butler's attire stood in the doorway, his face carefully neutral, despite the obvious terror in his scent. Behind him, Elena could see movement pack members scrambling to prepare for the unexpected royal visit. "Alpha King Theron," the butler said, bowing deeply. We were not expecting Alpha Cross was not informed of your visit. Official visits are for allies," Theron said coldly, ascending the steps with Elena at his side. "Inspections are for packs under investigation. Where is Alpha Cross?" In his office, my lord. I'll inform him immediately. Don't bother." Theron walked past him into the grand entrance hall. "We know the way." Elena followed, and the moment she crossed the threshold, a wave of memory hit her. She'd grown up in this house, had run through these halls as a child, had celebrated festivals in the great room to the left, had cried in the library to the right when the other children mocked her for being wolfless. But the girl who'd lived here was dead. The woman who returned was something else entirely. Pack members emerged from doorways and side rooms, drawn by the commotion. Elena recognized faces, pack elders, former schoolmates, neighbors who'd watched her grow up. They stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror as they recognized features they thought belonged to a dead girl. "Is that can't be?" Elena Ashford thought she was dead. Theron's guards moved to flank them as they walked down the center hallway toward the Alpha's office. The crowd parted like water, instinct forcing them to yield to superior power. Damien's office door was closed. Theron didn't knock. He simply placed his hand on the doorknob and sent a pulse of Alpha authority through it that shattered the lock. The door swung open with enough force to crack against the wall. Damien was behind his desk, paperwork spread before him, a glass of whiskey within reach despite the early hour. He looked up sharply, and when he saw Theron and Elena framed in the doorway, the blood drained from his face. "King Theron," he stammered, rising quickly and nearly knocking over his drink. We weren't expecting. What brings you to Silverpine?" "Justice," Theron said simply. He entered the office without invitation, and Elena followed. His guards remained in the hallway, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. Damien's eyes darted to Elena, then away, as if looking at her too long might turn him to stone. "I don't understand. Justice for what?" "For Beta Hemlock's murder," Theron said, moving to the window and looking out at the deteriorating territory. "For the systematic poisoning of an ancient bloodline. For the assassination of Alpha Nathaniel and Luna Margaret Ashford 18 years ago." "Should I continue?" Damien's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Finally, he managed. "Beta Hemlock's death was ruled a suicide. The investigation is closed." "The investigation you closed," Elena said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the soft-spoken girl Damien remembered. "How convenient. The man who orchestrated my poisoning dies right after his conspiracy is exposed before he can be properly questioned, before he can reveal who was truly pulling the strings." She moved closer to Damien's desk and he instinctively backed away until he hit the wall. But here's what you didn't consider, Damien. Hemlock kept records, very detailed records, and they've been recovered. This was partially a bluff. Theron's people were currently searching Hemlock's residence and office, but Damien didn't need to know that. I don't know what you're talking about, Damien said, but his voice shook. Elena, if this is about what happened at the summit, I'm sorry. I panicked. I didn't know what to say. This isn't about the summit, Elena interrupted. This is about 18 years of poisoning. This is about my parents being murdered because they discovered what was being done to me. This is about a conspiracy that goes far beyond one corrupt beta. She leaned forward, placing both hands on his desk. Who gave the order, Damien? Who told Hemlock to suppress my bloodline? Who arranged my parents' accident? I don't know. Damien's voice rose, panic making it sharp. I swear I don't know. My father never told me about any conspiracy. Hemlock arranged everything. He said you were latent, that it was natural, that your father knew. A new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood there, bent with age, but with eyes that were sharp and knowing. Elena recognized her, Elder Moira, the oldest member of the Pack Council. She'd been ancient when Elena was a child, and she looked even more withered now. Elder Moira, Theron said, his voice carefully respectful. The old woman might look frail, but she carried the authority of age and tradition. You have information? I have the truth, Moira said, shuffling into the room with the aid of a carved wooden cane. And it's time it came to light. I'm too old to carry this poison anymore. She fixed Damien with a disgusted look. Your father, Alpha Gideon, ordered Elena's suppression. He and Hemlock discovered what she was when she was 4 years old during a routine health screening. Her blood showed markers of the ancient lichen strain. Gideon was terrified. A female with that bloodline would be stronger than any male alpha, would challenge the patriarchal succession, would threaten everything the old guard had built. Elena felt rage building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still, to listen. Gideon convinced Hemlock to begin the poisoning, Moira continued. Small doses of modified wolfsbane in her food and vitamins, just enough to sever the connection to her wolf without killing her human side. They planned to keep her suppressed until she was of mating age, then marry her to Damien to secure the bloodline while keeping her powerless. But my parents found out, Elena said, the pieces clicking together. Moira nodded. Nathaniel Ashford was smarter than Gideon gave him credit for. He noticed Elena wasn't developing like other pups, started asking questions, demanded answers. Threatened to take Elena to the healers in the north who would discover the suppression. The old woman's voice grew heavy with sorrow. So Gideon arranged the accident, made it look like brake failure on a mountain road. Nathaniel and Margaret died instantly. The room was except for the sound of rain against the windows. Elena felt like she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her parents hadn't just died, they'd been murdered, executed for trying to protect her. You knew, Elena whispered, her voice deadly quiet. You've known for 18 years and you said nothing? I was a coward, Moira admitted. I voted against the suppression when Gideon first proposed it to the Elder Council. But I was outvoted 3-1. And after your parents died, after I saw what Gideon was willing to do, I was too afraid to speak up. I told myself I was protecting the other pack members, that staying silent was the price of keeping everyone else safe. She looked at Elena with ancient, tired eyes. I am sorry, child. Sorrier than you can know. But sorry doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't undo 18 years of poison. It doesn't restore what was stolen from you. Elena turned to Damien. Did you know? Did you know your father murdered mine? No. Damien's face was ash gray. I swear, Elena, I didn't know until just now. I thought your parents' death was an accident. I thought you were naturally latent. My father told me you were a liability for genetic reasons, that our pups would be weak. But he never said never told me. His voice broke. I'm a monster. I pushed you off that cliff because I believed his lies. I killed you for nothing, for a throne built on murder and deception. You didn't kill me, Elena said. You tried to. There's a difference, and that difference is why you're still breathing. She straightened and looked at Theron. Where are the other elders? The ones who voted with Gideon? Dead, Moira supplied. Elder Thorne died of old age 4 years ago. Elder Silas had a stroke last year. Only Elder Benedict remains, and he's in the care facility on the north side of the property. His mind is gone. He doesn't remember his own name, much less decades-old conspiracies. How convenient, Elena said bitterly. Everyone who could face justice already gone. Not everyone, Theron said. His violet eyes were cold with calculation. Gideon Cross is dead, but it's his estate remains, his assets, his legacy. He looked at Damien. How much of your pack's current resources came from your father's accumulated wealth? Damien looked confused by the question. Most of it. My personal accounts, the pack operating funds, the property deeds, it all passed to me when he died. Why? Because, Theron said with dark satisfaction. Under ancient pack law, assets acquired through crimes against the Lycan bloodline are forfeit. Every coin Gideon earned while suppressing Elena, every property he bought, every investment he made, all of it is illegally obtained and subject to seizure. Damien's face went white. You can't. That's everything. That's the entire pack's financial foundation. Then, you should have chosen your father more carefully, Theron said without sympathy. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. My lawyers will be here tomorrow to begin the asset recovery process. Everything Gideon owned now belongs to Elena as restitution for crimes against her person and bloodline. But the pack members. Damien protested desperately. They had nothing to do with this. They're already starving. If you take everything, the pack members will be given a choice. Elena said, and everyone turned to look at her. They can remain under your leadership, Damien, in which case they share your fate, or... She paused, letting the word hang. They can swear loyalty to me. The room went silent. You? Damien breathed. You want to take over Silverpine? I want justice. Elena corrected. And justice means tearing down everything built on corruption and rebuilding it the right way. Silverpine Pack is dying under your leadership. The land itself rejects you. The crops fail, the game flees. The river turns foul. You know why. Damien said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Elena turned to Elder Moira. Gather the pack, everyone who can walk in the Great Hall. 1 hour. Moira studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. As you command, Ancient One. The title Ancient One, reserved for the original Lycan bloodlines, hung in the air like a benediction or a threat, depending on who was listening. An hour later, every member of Silverpine Pack who could attend had crowded into the Great Hall. Elena stood on the raised platform, where alpha announcements were traditionally made with Theron beside her and his guards positioned strategically around the room. Damien stood off to the side, looking like a man watching his own execution. Elder Moira had done her work well. The pack members packed the space, over 300 wolves, from elders to pups, all staring at Elena with expressions ranging from confusion to hope to fear. Many of you remember me. Elena began, her voice carrying to the back of the hall without needing to shout. 6 months of training with Theron had taught her how to project authority. I am Elena Ashford, daughter of Nathaniel and Margaret Ashford. 18 years ago, my parents were murdered by Alpha Gideon Cross because they discovered I was being systematically poisoned to suppress my bloodline. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. For 18 years, I was fed modified wolfsbane in my food and vitamins, Elena continued. I was told I was latent, broken, worthless. I was made to feel like a burden on this pack, and when I became an inconvenience to Damien Cross's political ambitions, she gestured to the pale alpha. I was pushed off Widow's Peak to die in the river below. More gasps. Some pack members looked shocked. Others looked guilty, ashamed they'd believed the lies. But I didn't die, Elena said, and she let her eyes flash electric blue. I was saved by the Alpha King. The poison was flushed from my system. My wolf was freed, and I learned the truth. I am not broken. I never was. I carry the blood of the first lichens, the ancient strain, the original shifters. She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Silverpine pack is dying. Your crops fail, your livestock sicken, your river turns toxic. You know why? Even if you don't want to admit it. The land rejects corrupt leadership. Nature punishes those who betray the sacred bonds of pack and mate. Elena's voice hardened. Damien Cross pushed his fated mate off a cliff. He tried to murder an ancient bloodline. And whether you knew about the conspiracy or not, you've all benefited from it. You've all accepted his leadership. You've all looked the way while your territory rotted. The pack members shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her gaze. So here's what's going to happen, Elena said. Effective immediately, all assets belonging to the estate of Gideon Cross are forfeit as restitution for crimes against my bloodline. That includes pack operating funds, property deeds, and business holdings. Panic rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "But that's everything. How will we survive?" "That depends on you," Elena replied. "You have a choice. You can remain loyal to Damien Cross. You can follow him into whatever future awaits a cursed alpha, ruling a dying territory, in which case you're on your own." She paused, letting the weight of that option settle. "Or you can swear loyalty to me. You can accept me as your Alpha and Luna. You can work to rebuild what corruption destroyed. And in exchange, I will break the curse. I will heal the land. I will restore Silverpine to what it should have been all along." "But you can't be Alpha." Someone in the crowd protested. "You're female. The ancient laws. Elder Moira's voice cut through the objection. "State that lichen blood supersedes gender. An ancient bloodline female outranks any alpha male. This is the oldest law written before patriarchy twisted our traditions." Elena inclined her head in thanks to the elder, then addressed the pack again. "I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm giving you 3 days. 3 days to think about what kind of pack you want to be. 3 days to decide if you want leadership built on lies and murder or leadership built on truth and strength." She stepped forward to the edge of the platform. "But know this, if you choose me, I will not be a soft leader. I will not tolerate betrayal. I will not accept weakness. I will demand loyalty, discipline, and hard work. We will rebuild Silverpine from the ground up, and it will be painful and difficult. But at the end of it, you'll have a pack worth being proud of again." Silence filled the hall. Then from the back, an old man stepped forward. Elena recognized him, Gideon Thornfield, a farmer whose fields bordered her parents' old property. "I choose you, Elena Ashford," Gideon said, his voice strong despite his age. "Your father was a good man. Your mother was a good woman. They deserved better than what Gideon Cross gave them. And so did you." He dropped to one knee. "I swear my loyalty to you, Ancient One." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a young mother, with 2 pups clutching her skirt, stepped forward. "I choose you too. My children deserve a future that isn't cursed." She knelt. Then another pack member and another, like a dam breaking wolves, began moving forward, dropping to their knees, pledging their loyalty. Within minutes, over 2/3 of the pack had made their choice. Elena's throat tightened with emotion she hadn't expected. These people, many of whom had ignored or pitied her for years, were now looking at her as their salvation. When the movement finally stopped, approximately 80 wolves remained standing. They clustered around Damien. Loyalty or fear or stubbornness, keeping them tethered to the fallen alpha. Elena looked at them without judgment. "You've made your choice. You have until dawn tomorrow to gather your belongings and leave Silverpine territory. Anyone found within pack borders after sunrise will be treated as a rogue and dealt with accordingly. Damien looked at the wolves who'd remained loyal to him, barely a quarter of his pack, and something in him seemed to break. He looked at Elena with hollow eyes. What about me? Do I leave too? Elena considered him for a long moment. Part of her, the wounded girl who'd loved him, wanted to show mercy. But the wolf, the predator, the ancient blood in her veins, demanded something else. You stay, she said finally. You stay and watch everything you thought was yours slip through your fingers. You stay and see what Silverpine becomes under real leadership. You stay and live with the consequences of your choices every single day. She stepped closer to him. You wanted power, Damien. You killed for it, so I'm giving it to you, the power of knowledge. You get to know every day, for the rest of your life, that you had something precious and you threw it away. That you could have been great and you chose to be small. That's your punishment, not death, not exile, just truth. Damien's face crumpled, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. Elena, I'm so sorry. I know, Elena said, and she walked away. That night, Elena stood in what had been her parents' room. Theron had offered to let her stay in the master's suite. Now, hers by right. But she'd wanted this space instead. The room where she'd gone as a child when she had nightmares. The room that still smelled faintly of her mother's lavender perfume and her father's pipe tobacco. A knock at the door. Come in, she called. Theron entered carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed her one and leaned against the wall, studying her in the dim lamplight. You did well today, he said. Better than well. You gave them a queen. I gave them a choice, Elena corrected. They made me a queen. Is there a difference? Theron's mouth curved in a slight smile. Elena sipped the whiskey, letting the burn ground her. Did you always know that I'd end up here? That I'd take over Silverpine? I knew you'd end up somewhere powerful, Theron said. Whether that was at my side in Shadowland or on your own throne in Silverpine, that was always going to be your choice. He moved closer, and the air between them charged with that familiar electricity. And now you have to choose, Elena. Do you stay here and rebuild Silverpine? Or do you come back to Shadowland with me? Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected the question, though she should have. You said I owed you service, that I was your weapon. I release you from that oath, Theron said simply. You've more than earned your freedom. You can stay here, rule your pack, live your life. I won't hold you to an agreement made when you were broken and desperate. And if I want to come back? Elena asked, her heart hammering. If I want to be in Shadowland? Theron's violet eyes burned into hers. Then you come back not as my weapon, not as my soldier, not as someone who owes me a debt. He reached out and cupped her face, his touch achingly gentle. You come back as my equal, my partner, He stopped, seeming to struggle with the word. Your mate? Elena finished for him. Theron's breath caught. I didn't want to presume. You've been through so much. The last thing I wanted was to pressure you into. Elena kissed him. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was claiming, possessing. The wolf in her recognized the wolf in him and demanding acknowledgement. Theron made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair as he kissed her back, with months of restrained desire finally unleashed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena smiled up at him. I choose both, she said. I rule Silverpine, but I live in Shadowland with you, as your mate and your equal. The logistics of that will be complicated, Theron said. But he was smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way she'd never seen from him. Good thing we're both very good at complicated, Elena replied. Theron laughed, actually laughed, and kissed her again. Good thing indeed. Chapter 7: The Coronation. 3 weeks later, the transformation of Silverpine Pack was already visible. The physical changes were subtle but undeniable. The river ran clearer. The fields seemed less waterlogged, and the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the territory, like a shroud, had begun to lift. But the real transformation was in the people. Elena stood in what had been Gideon Cross's office, now stripped of its dark wood paneling and heavy masculine furniture, replaced with lighter colors and windows thrown open to let in fresh air and sunlight. Maps covered one wall, detailed plans for crop rotation, irrigation systems, and infrastructure repairs. On her desk sat reports from work crews, budget projections, and a growing list of PAC members who'd requested audiences to air grievances that had been ignored under previous leadership. "You've barely slept in 2 weeks," Theron's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, dressed in simple black tactical gear, having just returned from a border patrol with his guards. "Even wolves need rest, Elena." "I'll rest when the coronation is over," Elena replied, not looking up from the water rights treaty she was reviewing. "There's too much to do. The irrigation channels need to be dredged before spring planting. The pack house needs structural repairs. And I still haven't resolved the dispute between the Thornfield and Morrison families over grazing rights." Theron crossed the room and physically removed the document from her hands. "The grazing dispute has existed for 40 years. It can wait another day. You, however, cannot keep pushing yourself like this. You're running on fumes and stubbornness." Elena wanted to argue, but a wave of exhaustion hit her so hard, she swayed slightly. Theron caught her, his strong hand steadying her. "When did you last eat?" he demanded. "Breakfast, I think." Elena rubbed her eyes. "Maybe yesterday's breakfast?" "Impossible, woman," Theron muttered, but there was affection in his voice. He guided her to the leather couch against the wall and physically sat her down. "Stay. I'm getting you food, and you're going to eat it while I explain why you're going to delegate more." "I can't delegate," Elena protested. "These people just swore loyalty to me. I need to prove I'm worthy of that loyalty." "You prove it by being an effective leader, not by working yourself to death," Theron countered. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. "Your second in command is Gideon Thornfield. Use him. Your head of security is Raina Steele. She's former military and extremely competent. Use her. You have advisors for a reason." "I don't trust easily," Elena admitted quietly. "Not after everything." Theron's expression softened. He sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. "I know, but you can't rebuild an entire pack alone. That's not strength, it's fear wearing a crown." The words hit harder than Elena wanted to admit. Before she could respond, a knock came at the door. A young Omega entered with a tray of food, sandwiches, fruit, cheese, and a pot of tea that smelled of chamomile and honey. "Luna Ashford," the Omega said, setting the tray on the coffee table. "Compliments of the kitchen staff. They said you missed lunch again." "Thank you," Elena said, genuinely touched. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Luna." The girl ducked her head shyly. "I work in the kitchens. My mother asked me to tell you that the pack is grateful for what you're doing, the changes, the hope." After Sophie left, Elena stared at the food with an odd tightness in her chest. "They're calling me Luna already. I haven't even been officially coronated." "They're calling you what you are," Theron said, pushing the plate toward her. "Now eat before I have to feed you myself." Elena picked up a sandwich and took a bite, suddenly realizing how ravenous she was. "Tell me about your coronation," she said between bites. "What should I expect?" Theron leaned back, his expression going distant with memory. "Mine was 200 years ago and involved significantly more blood sacrifice than yours will." "Different times." He caught her alarmed look and smiled. "Metaphorical blood sacrifice. Mostly. I had to defeat 3 challengers in ritual combat to prove my right to rule." "Will I have to fight?" Elena asked. "Technically. Any pack member can issue a challenge during the coronation ceremony," Theron explained. "It's their last chance to object to your leadership before you're formally recognized by the High Council. But given that you're an ancient bloodline and you've already proven your power." His eyes gleamed with remembered pride. "I doubt anyone will be stupid enough to challenge you." "And if they do?" Elena pressed. Then you put them down quickly and decisively, Theron said without hesitation. You're not that soft girl anymore, Elena. You're an alpha. If someone challenges you, it's not personal, it's political. They're testing whether you have the spine to lead. Show them you do. Elena nodded, filing that away. What about the mating bond? I know the ceremony is technically separate from the coronation, but everyone expects we'll formalize it during the same event. Theron's expression shifted, becoming more intense. The mating ceremony is sacred, permanent. Once the bond is formalized before witnesses and acknowledged by pack magic, it can't be broken except by death. He reached out and took her hand. Are you certain this is what you want? I meant what I said. I released you from any obligation to me. If you'd rather rule Silverpine independently, I'm certain, Elena interrupted. The question is whether you're certain. You've been alone for centuries. You've ruled absolutely with no one to question you. Can you really share power with someone who won't just follow orders? Theron's laugh was low and rough. Elena, I don't want someone who follows orders. I've had centuries of that, and it's boring as hell. I want someone who challenges me. Someone who makes me think. Someone who's strong enough to tell me when I'm wrong, and powerful enough that I actually listen. He leaned closer, his violet eyes capturing hers. I want you. Not the broken girl I found on the riverbank, not some idealized fantasy of what you could be. You, exactly as you are now, fierce and stubborn, and still learning your power. That's what I want. Elena's breath caught. Then you'll have me on one condition. Name it. We rule as equals, Elena said, firmly. Not you granting me power, not me deferring to your authority. True equals. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, including decision-making, resources, and respect. Done, Darren said immediately. I wouldn't want it any other way. He paused, then added with dark humor. Though I reserve the right to occasionally pull rank when you're running yourself into the ground like you've been doing. Elena smiled despite herself. Deal. But I reserve the right to ignore you when I think you're being overprotective. Wouldn't expect anything less. Darren kissed her, soft and sweet, then pulled back. Now finish eating. The ceremony is in 3 days, and you need to be at full strength. The day of the coronation dawned clear and cold, the first genuinely beautiful day Silverpine had seen in months. It felt like an omen, the land itself acknowledging the change in leadership. The ceremony was held in the sacred grove, a clearing deep in Silverpine's oldest forest, where pack rituals had been performed for generations. Ancient oaks formed a natural cathedral, their branches interlocking overhead to create a living ceiling. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone altar, carved with symbols that predated modern language: wolf, heads, moons, spirals representing the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Every member of Silverpine Pack who'd sworn loyalty to Elena was present, arranged in concentric circles around the altar. Representatives from neighboring packs had been invited as witnesses, not just out of courtesy, but as political necessity. Elena's claim to Silverpine needed to be recognized by the broader wolf community, or her rule would be seen as illegitimate. Elena waited in the preparation tent at the edge of the grove, wearing ceremonial robes that had belonged to her grandmother, white silk embroidered with silver thread in patterns that caught the light like moonlight on water. Her hair was unbound, flowing down her back in pale waves. The nightshade sigil gleamed at her throat. You look like an ancient queen, a voice said from the tent entrance. Elder Moira entered, moving more easily than Elena had ever seen her. The old woman studied her, with knowing eyes. Your mother would be proud. Your father, too. Elena's throat tightened. I wish they were here to see this. They are, Moira said with certainty. The dead don't leave us, child. They live in the land, in the wind, in the blood we carry. Your parents are here. They've been here all along, waiting for this moment. The elder reached into her robes and pulled out a small wooden box. This belonged to your mother. Margaret asked me to keep it safe and give it to you when the time was right. I think that time is now." Elena opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a ring, simple silver band engraved with ancient runes, and beneath it, a letter written in her mother's flowing script. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally come to light. It means you've survived the darkness we tried to protect you from. It means you've become what we always knew you could be. Your father and I discovered what was being done to you when you were 4 years old. We tried to fight it, tried to expose it, but Gideon Cross was too powerful and we were too naive. We thought love and truth would be enough. We were wrong. This ring belonged to your grandmother and her grandmother before her. It's been passed down through the Ashford line for 10 generations, always to the strongest female, never to the males, because our line carries something precious that only shows in daughters. Power. True power. Wear this ring and know that you are not broken. You never were. You are exactly what you were always meant to be. A leader, a warrior, a queen in your own right. We love you, Elena. We will always love you. Live well. Live fiercely. Live without apology. Your mother, Margaret Ashford." Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Elder Moira said nothing, simply stood witness to her grief and her healing. Finally, Elena slipped the ring onto her right hand. It fit perfectly, the metal warming against her skin as if recognizing her blood. "Thank you," she whispered to Moira, "for keeping it safe, for telling the truth when it mattered. I should have spoken sooner." Moira said with deep regret, "I should have been braver, but the past cannot be changed, only the future. So go out there and build a future worthy of your parents' sacrifice." The ceremony began at noon when the sun was at its highest point. Elena walked into the sacred grove alone. Tradition dictated that she enter without escort or champion, proving she came to power through her own strength. The pack members parted as she walked, down the center aisle, their eyes tracking her movement. Some looked at her with hope, others with curiosity, a few with barely concealed skepticism, especially the older males who'd grown up believing females couldn't lead. Darren stood to the side with the other pack representatives, dressed in full ceremonial regalia as Alpha King. His violet eyes tracked her every movement, pride and possessiveness radiating from him in waves. Elena reached the stone altar where Elder Moira waited, along with 2 other surviving elders who'd been neutral in the previous regime. The ceremony was being presided over by a representative from the High Council, an ancient female named Celeste, who'd been officiating coronations for longer than most packs had existed. Elena Ashford. Celeste's voice rang out, magically amplified to reach every corner of the grove. You stand before your pack and before the eyes of the wolf community. You claim leadership of Silverpine Pack by right of blood and by right of conquest. Do you understand what you claim? I understand, Elena said clearly. To be Alpha is to be first in battle and last in retreat, Celeste continued, reciting the ancient words. To be Alpha is to bear the weight of every decision and the consequences of every failure. To be Alpha is to sacrifice self for pack, always and without exception. Do you accept this burden? I accept it. Then let any who would challenge this claim come forward now, Celeste declared. Or forever hold their silence. Elena's muscles tensed, ready for combat. For a long moment, nothing happened. The grove was silent except for the wind through the trees. Then movement in the crowd. A male wolf stepped forward, large, heavily muscled, with the bearing of a warrior. Elena recognized him as Thomas Grayson, former head of Silverpine's border patrol under Gideon Cross. He'd been one of the wolves who'd remained loyal to Damien initially, but had switched sides after seeing Elena's power. I challenge, Thomas said, his voice carrying. Not because I doubt your blood, Luna Ashford, but because tradition demands proof of strength. I ask that you prove you're right in combat, the crowd murmured. This was within his rights, though it was clearly a calculated political move. Thomas was testing her, yes, but he was also giving her the chance to prove herself in a way that would silence all doubters. Elena stepped away from the altar, pulling off the ceremonial robes to reveal the fitted tactical gear she wore underneath. She'd been prepared for this. Darren had made sure of it. "I accept your challenge," Elena said. "What are the terms?" "First blood," Thomas replied. "Wolf form. No holds barred otherwise." Agreed. Elena rolled her shoulders, loosening her muscles. "Elder Celeste, if you would officiate." The ancient councilwoman nodded. "Thomas Grayson of Silverpine challenges Elena Ashford for right of leadership. Combat will be to first blood in wolf form." Both parties have agreed. On my mark, shift. The transformation was instantaneous for both of them. Thomas became a large brown wolf, easily 200 pounds of muscle and fang. A formidable opponent. But Elena became the white wolf. She was larger than Thomas by at least 50 pounds. Her white fur tipped with silver gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her electric blue eyes burned with power that made even the other alphas present take a step back. This wasn't just a wolf. This was something ancient, something primal, something that belonged in legends rather than living memory. Thomas hesitated for just a fraction of a second, his instincts screaming danger. That hesitation was his undoing. The white wolf moved with blinding speed, closing the distance before Thomas could react. She didn't go for his throat, that would be killing intent, not first blood. Instead, she darted in low, her teeth finding his foreleg and biting down just hard enough to break skin. Thomas yelped and stumbled. The white wolf released him and backed off, giving him room to surrender or continue. Thomas, to his credit, knew when he was outmatched. He lowered his head in submission, exposing his throat. The fight had lasted less than 15 seconds. Elena shifted back to human form, breathing easily, not even winded. "Well fought," she said to Thomas, offering him a hand up after he too shifted back. "I want you to remain as head of Border Patrol if you're willing." Your challenge showed honor, not disrespect. Thomas took her hand, his face showing a mixture of relief and awe. "It would be my honor, Luna Ashford." He raised his voice so the entire pack could hear. "I submit to Elena Ashford as Alpha of Silver Pine Pack. Let all who witness this know she is the true leader." The pack erupted in howls of approval. The tension that had gripped the grove released like a snapped bowstring. Celeste smiled an expression that transformed her ancient face. "Any other challenges?" she asked dryly. Silence. No one else was foolish enough to test the white wolf after that display. "Then it is settled," Celeste declared. "By right of blood, by right of combat, and by the will of the pack, I declare Elena Ashford to be Alpha and Luna of Silver Pine Pack. Let the land know her. Let the spirits acknowledge her. Let all who dwell within these borders recognize her authority." The ancient councilwoman placed her hands on Elena's head, and power surged through the grove-old magic, pack magic, the kind that bound leader to land to people in ways that transcended the physical. Elena gasped as she felt it flood through her. The weight of Silver Pine settling onto her shoulders, the awareness of her territory expanding into her consciousness, the lives of her pack members becoming threads she could sense and feel. "It is done," Celeste said. "Rise, Alpha Elena Ashford of Silver Pine." Elena stood, and she was no longer just a woman. She was Alpha. She was Luna. She was the living embodiment of Silver Pine Pack. The mating ceremony followed immediately before the gathered witnesses and pack members. This was Theron's tradition, not Silver Pine's, but no one objected to combining the ceremonies. Partly because it was practical, but mostly because no one wanted to risk offending the Alpha King. Theron stepped forward to stand beside Elena at the altar. This close, the power radiating from both of them was almost visible, violet and blue, shadow and moonlight, perfectly complementary. "The mating bond is the oldest of our traditions," Celeste said, beginning the ancient rites. It supersedes pack, supersedes territory, supersedes all other bonds. To mate is to become one in flesh, in spirit, in power. She looked at Theron. Theron Nightshade, Alpha King of Shadowland, do you offer the bond to Elena Ashford? I do, Theron said, his voice resonating with power. I offer my blood, my bone, my soul from this life to whatever after. Elena Ashford, Alpha of Silver Pine, do you accept this bond? Elena met Theron's violet gaze, seeing centuries of loneliness and the hope of finally ending it. I accept. I offer my blood, my bone, my soul, from this life to whatever comes after. Then seal the bond, Celeste commanded. Theron pulled out a ceremonial blade and made a shallow cut across his palm. Elena did the same. They clasped hands, their blood mingling, and the moment their blood touched, power exploded through the grove. The mating bond snapped into place, a connection so profound it was like gaining an entirely new sense. Elena could feel Theron's emotions, his thoughts, his very heartbeat, and she knew he could feel hers just as clearly. They were still separate people, but also somehow one entity now. Two wolves, one pack. It is done, Celeste declared, her voice carrying satisfaction. Before the pack, before the spirits, before the very earth itself, Theron Nightshade and Elena Ashford are mated. Let no one tear asunder what the bond has joined. The pack erupted in howls again, celebrating both their new alpha and her powerful mate. Other pack representatives came forward to offer congratulations and subtle political overtures. The celebration would continue for hours, probably into the night. But for one perfect moment, Elena and Theron simply stood together, hands still clasped, blood still mingling, feeling the weight and wonder of what they'd just done. How do you feel? Theron asked, through their new mental connection. Terrified, Elena admitted. Complete, powerful, overwhelmed, all of it at once. Welcome to being mated to an alpha king, Theron said with dark humor. It only gets more complicated from here. Elena laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in what felt like years. Good. I like complicated. I know you do, Theron said and kissed her as the pack howled their approval, and the sun shone down on Silver Pine with a warmth that hadn't been felt there in months. The curse was broken. The alpha was crowned. The mate bond was sealed, and though challenges still lay ahead, for the first time since being pushed off that cliff, Elena Ashford felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again. She felt like she was home. Chapter 8. The confrontation. The weeks following the coronation passed in a blur of activity. Silver Pine's transformation accelerated. The river ran clear and cold again, fish returning to waters that had been dead for months. The fields, though still recovering, showed the first green shoots of new growth. Pack members who'd been gaunt and hollow-eyed began to fill out, their wolves becoming stronger, as the land healed beneath them. But there were still loose ends, still unfinished business that gnawed at Elena every time she passed the small cottage on the eastern edge of Pack territory where Damien Cross lived in exile. It was there that Theron found her one evening, standing at the tree line staring at the cottage, with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You've been avoiding this," Theron said, coming to stand beside her. Through their bond, he could feel the turmoil in her, anger and pity and residual hurt all tangled together. "I don't know what to do with them," Elena admitted. "Damien and Vivian. They're still here, still part of the pack, but everyone knows what they did. It's like having an infected wound that won't heal because I keep refusing to deal with it." "What do you want to do?" Theron asked carefully. "Not what you think you should do as Alpha. What do you, Elena, want?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me wants them gone, exiled, erased from my life completely. But another part," she trailed off, struggling with words. "Another part wants them to understand," Theron finished. "Wants them to truly comprehend what they destroyed and what they lost." Elena nodded. "Is that petty? Vengeful?" "It's human," Theron said. "And Wolf, we're creatures of justice and balance. What was taken should be restored." What was broken should be acknowledged. He turned her to faces him. But you need closure, Elena. We both know this. So let's finish it. Tonight. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the decision settle in her bones. Tonight? She agreed. They went to Damien's cottage as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Theron's guards flanked them, not because they expected violence, but because this was official pack business and required witnesses. Elena knocked on the door with more force than necessary. It opened almost immediately, as if Damien had been waiting. He looked terrible. The handsome, confident alpha heir was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the doorframe. "Elena," he breathed. "Luna, I wasn't expecting." "Is Vivian here?" Elena asked, her voice professionally cold. Damien nodded mutely and stepped aside. The cottage was small. 2 rooms sparsely furnished. Vivian sat at a rough wooden table, her once perfect appearance now disheveled. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple homespun fabric. Her manicured nails were ragged, but it was her eyes that showed the real damage. They held a desperate, hunted quality. "Alpha Elena," Vivian said, standing quickly. She tried to curtsy and nearly fell, catching herself on the table. "We're honored by your visit." "Sit down," Elena commanded. Both of them obeyed instantly, the alpha authority in her voice compelling submission. She pulled out a chair across from them and sat, with Theron standing behind her, a silent pillar of support and power. "3 months ago, you pushed me off a cliff," Elena began without preamble. "You tried to murder me to secure your political position and cover up a conspiracy of poisoning and assassination that had been going on for 18 years. Damien flinched, with each word like they were physical blows. "Since then, I've taken back Silver Pine. I've broken the curse your actions created. I've begun healing the damage your leadership caused. And I've done all of this while you've lived here, watching, existing in a kind of limbo." Elena leaned forward. "That ends tonight, one way or another. Are you going to kill us?" Vivian asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I haven't decided yet," Elena said honestly. "That's why we're here. I want to understand something. I want to know why. Not the politics of it, I understand those. I want to know how 2 people I trusted, 2 people I loved, could look me in the eye and choose murder." Damien's face crumpled. "Elena, I was weak, I was scared. My father filled my head with ideas about strong bloodlines and political necessity," and his voice broke. "I know those aren't excuses. I know there's nothing I can say makes it right, but I need you to understand. I didn't want to do it. I thought I had to. For the pack, for the future. You thought you had to murder your mate for the pack?" Ina's voice was ice. "The pack that's now thriving without you? The territory that's healing because you're not leading it anymore?" "I was wrong," Damien whispered. "About everything. About you being weak. About power coming from bloodlines. About what makes a good alpha. I was wrong. And by the time I realized it, it was too late. You were already falling." Elena turned to Vivian. "And you? What's your excuse?" Vivian's hands twisted in her lap. "Jealousy," she said finally, the word bitter. "You had everything I wanted, the ancient bloodline, Damien's childhood affection, the respect of the pack members, even though you couldn't shift. You were loved without earning it, and I worked so hard to be perfect. To be strong. To be everything a Luna should be. But it was never enough. You were always there. Always the standard I couldn't reach." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "So when my father told me about the plan, when he said we could remove you, and I could take your place, I jumped at it. I told myself you didn't deserve what you had, that I would be a better Luna, that I was doing the pack a favor." She laughed bitterly. "I was lying to myself. I just wanted what you had, and I was willing to kill for it. You were my best friend," Elena said, and for the first time, real emotion cracked through her professional facade. We grew up together. I trusted you with everything. How could you smile in my face while helping to poison me? How could you stand there on that cliff and watch Damien push me? I don't know. Vivian sobbed. I don't know. I keep asking myself that. I keep seeing your face as you fell. And I can't sleep anymore. I can't eat. Every time I close my eyes, I see you screaming as you disappeared into the river. Good, Elena said coldly. You should see it. You should never forget it. Because that's the real punishment. Living with what you've done. Living with the knowledge that you destroyed something precious out of petty jealousy and ambition. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I could kill you both. Pack law would support it. You attempted to murder your Luna. The penalty is death, by any means the Alpha chooses. I could shift right now and tear out your throats, and everyone would say it was justice. Damien closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Vivian continued to cry silently. But I'm not going to kill you. Elena continued, because death is easy. Death is escape. And I want you to live with this. I want you to spend every day of your miserable lives remembering what you lost. What you could have had if you'd just been brave enough, strong enough, to be decent people. She moved to the door, then paused. However, you can't stay here. Your presence poisons this territory. You're a reminder of corruption and betrayal, and Silverpine deserves better. So here are your options. Elena turned back to face them. Option 1, exile. You leave Silverpine territory tonight and never return. You become rogues, packless wolves trying to survive in a world that doesn't trust those without pack bonds. It's a hard life, and most rogues don't last more than a few years. Vivian's face went even paler. Option 2, Elena continued. You submit to the High Council for judgment. I present evidence of your crimes, conspiracy to murder, abuse of pack authority, falsifying pregnancy to manipulate succession. You'll be tried publicly, and if found guilty, which you will be, the punishment is typically execution or permanent magical binding that prevents you from ever shifting again. Damien made a choked sound of horror. To never shift again was a fate worse than death for most wolves. Or option 3, Elena said, and her voice softened slightly. You accept what I call redemption through service. You leave Silverpine, yes, but you go to the Southern Territories where they're rebuilding after the Civil War. You spend the next 10 years working physically, working to rebuild destroyed communities. You help orphaned pups. You clear rubble. You do the unglamorous, backbreaking work of restoration. She looked at them seriously. It won't erase what you did. Nothing can. But it might balance the scales a little. It might give you the chance to become people who could live with themselves. And if you survive those 10 years, if you actually commit to the work, you'll be allowed to petition for probationary pack membership somewhere far from here. Not Silverpine, never Silverpine, but somewhere. Why? Vivian whispered. Why offer us that option? We don't deserve mercy. You don't. Elena agreed. But mercy isn't about what you deserve. It's about who I choose to be. And I choose to be better than you. Better than your father. Better than Gideon Cross. She straightened her shoulders. You have until dawn to decide. Tell my guards which option you choose. If you try to run, if you choose exile and then try to return, or if you endanger anyone during your redemption service. Her eyes flashed electric blue. I will personally hunt you down and finish what should have been finished on that cliff. She walked out, without waiting for a response. Theron followed, and they made it to the tree line before Elena's composure finally cracked. She braced herself against a tree, breathing hard, fighting back tears she didn't want to shed. Theron said nothing, just pulled her into his arms and let her shake. I hate that part of me still cares, Elena said against his chest. I hate that I couldn't just kill them. I hate that I'm still soft enough to offer mercy. That's not softness, Theron said firmly. That's strength. It takes no courage to kill your enemies. It takes tremendous courage to find another way. to choose restoration over revenge. He pulled back to look at her. You gave them what they gave you, a chance to survive. What they do with it is their choice. Through their bond, Elena felt his absolute support, his pride in her decision, even though she knew he would have supported her just as strongly if she'd chosen execution. What do you think they'll choose? Elena asked. Redemption. Theron said with certainty, because exile means slow death, and council judgment means fast death or permanent loss of their wolves. The southern territories are hard, but at least it's hope. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and maybe in 10 years of hauling stones and caring for war orphans, they'll become something resembling decent people. Or they won't, and they'll fail, and that will be its own kind of justice. At dawn, Elena's guards brought word. Damien and Vivian had chosen redemption through service. They would leave within the hour, escorted by Shadowland warriors to the southern territories, where they would be handed over to the Reconstruction authorities. Elena watched from her office window as they loaded their meager belongings into a transport vehicle. Damien looked broken, but oddly relieved, as if finally having a path forward, even a painful one, was better than the limbo he'd been living in. Vivian moved like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions. Just before the vehicle departed, Damien looked up at the pack house. His eyes found Elena's window, though she doubted he could see her through the glare. He placed his hand over his heart, the old pack gesture of loyalty and respect, and bowed his head. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was acknowledgement, and somehow that was enough. Elena turned away from the window as the vehicle disappeared down the road. It's done, she said to Theron, who'd remained with her throughout the vigil. How do you feel? He asked. Elena considered the question. Lighter, she said finally. Like I was carrying something heavy and didn't realize it until I set it down. She moved into his arms, drawing comfort from his solid presence. There's someone else's problem now, someone else's chance at redemption or cautionary tale. I'm done with them. Good, Theron said. Because we have other things to focus on. The Spring Planting Festival is in 2 weeks. The border negotiations with Ironwood Pack need your attention. And his voice took on a teasing note. I believe there's the matter of formally announcing our mating bond to the broader Pack Alliance. Elena groaned. More politics, more ceremonies. Is this what being alpha is? Just endless formal events? It's about 50% formal events, 30% paperwork, and 20% actual crisis management, Theron said with a laugh. Welcome to leadership. It's tedious and exhausting, and you'll never have a moment's peace again. Sounds perfect, Elena said, surprising herself by meaning it, because for all the exhaustion and responsibility, this was hers. She'd built it, she'd earned it, she'd survived being murdered to claim it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Gideon Thornfield entered, looking apologetic. Sorry to disturb, Luna, but there's a situation at the southern border. Ironwood Pack is requesting an emergency meeting. They say it's urgent. Elena sighed and pulled away from Theon's embrace. What kind of urgent? They wouldn't say over communication channels, Gideon replied. But they've sent Alpha Garrett himself rather than a messenger. That suggests it's serious. Theon's expression sharpened. Garrett doesn't leave Ironwood territory lightly. Something's wrong. He looked at Elena. We should see him immediately. Elena nodded, already shifting into alpha mode, personal feelings compartmentalized, strategic thinking engaged. Have him brought to the formal receiving room. Full pack protocols. If Ironwood is asking for help, we need to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to anything. As they walked through the pack house to meet with Alpha Garrett, Elena felt the weight of leadership settling more comfortably on her shoulders. This was what she was now, not just a survivor of attempted murder, not just a woman seeking revenge, but a true alpha with responsibilities that extended beyond her own pack's borders. You know, Theon said through their bond as they prepared to enter the receiving room. Watching you step into your power never gets old. You're magnificent when you're in alpha mode. I learned from the best, Elena replied, letting warmth color her mental voice. You did, Theon agreed. But what you've become, that's all you. They entered the receiving room together, ready to face whatever new challenge awaited. Because that was what alphas did. They faced problems, solved crises, and protected their people. No matter how tired they were, no matter how much they'd already survived. Elena had died on a riverbank 6 months ago, but what had risen in her place was something the world hadn't seen in centuries, a true alpha, a white wolf, a queen in her own right, and she was just getting started. Alpha Garrett stood as they entered, a gesture of respect between equals rather than submission. He was an older wolf, gray-haired and scarred, with the bearing of someone who'd survived more battles than he cared to remember. Alpha Elena, King Theon, Garrett said, bowing his head slightly. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Alpha Garrett, Elena replied formally. Your presence honors Silver Pine. Please, sit. Tell us what brings you here. Garrett's expression was grim as he settled into the offered chair. I come with warnings and a request for alliance, son. There are forces moving in the Eastern Territories. Wolves we thought were long dead, old bloodlines we believed extinct. Gathering under a banner we haven't seen in 2 centuries. Theon went very still. What banner? The Red Crescent, Garrett said, and the words seemed to suck the warmth from the room. The blood wars are starting again. Elena looked at Theon and saw something she'd never seen in his face before, fear. Chapter 9. The Rising Storm. The Red Crescent. Even the name seemed to carry weight, seemed to make the shadows in the corners of the room grow darker and more oppressive. Elena had heard whispers of the blood wars in her history lessons as a child, old stories about ancient conflicts that had nearly destroyed the wolf packs entirely. But she'd always thought they were just that, stories, cautionary tales from a darker time. The expression on Theon's face told her they were very, very real. I need to see the evidence, Theon said, his voice carefully controlled. Through their bond, Elena could feel the storm of emotions he was keeping locked down. Old memories, old pain, old rage that had never fully healed. Garrett pulled a leather satchel from his coat and extracted several photographs. He spread them across the table with hands that weren't quite steady. These were taken by my scouts 3 days ago at the ruins of Blackmore Keep, 50 miles east of Ironwood territory. Elena leaned forward to study the images. They showed wolves, dozens of them, gathered in what looked like a military formation, but it was the banner hanging from the ruined keep's tower that made her breath catch. A red crescent moon dripping what looked like blood on a field of absolute black. How many? Theon asked, his jaw tight. At least 200 that we've confirmed, Garrett replied. But my scouts report more arriving daily. They're recruiting from rogue populations, from outcasts, from packs that feel disenfranchised by the current territorial agreements. He looked at Theon seriously. They're using your name, by the way, claiming that the Alpha King has grown soft, that the old ways are being forgotten, that it's time for a return to pure wolf culture. Pure wolf culture? Theon repeated with dark amusement. That's what they're calling it now? When I fought them 200 years ago, they called it culling the weak and survival of the strongest. Different words, same genocidal philosophy. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly are the blood wars? The history I learned in school was vague. Because the victors, those of us who survived, agreed never to speak of it in detail, Theon said. His violet eyes had gone distant, seeing things Elena couldn't. The blood wars were an attempt by extremist factions to eliminate what they called diluted bloodlines. Basically, they wanted to kill anyone who wasn't pure alpha stock, betas, omegas, anyone with mixed heritage, anyone who showed weakness or deviation from their ideal. Eugenics, Elena said flatly. They were practicing eugenics on a massive scale, Garrett added grimly. Over 50 zeros and wolves died in the 3 years the wars lasted. Entire packs were wiped out. Bloodlines that had existed for millennia were extinguished. It only ended when King Theon and a coalition of alphas from across the territories united to crush the Red Crescent's leadership. We thought we'd eliminated them completely, Theon said. We hunted down every member, every sympathizer, every wolf who'd sworn allegiance to their cause. But clearly, we missed some. Or, his eyes narrowed, someone's resurrected the ideology and recruited a new generation. Garrett nodded. My intelligence suggests it's a combination. There are a few old survivors, wolves who went into deep hiding and waited for the right moment to emerge. But most of the current membership is young. Wolves who've been radicalized by propaganda about returning to traditional values and wolf purity. And they've chosen now to make their move, Elena said, pieces clicking together. When do you think they'll attack? That's the question, Garrett replied. They're still in the gathering phase, recruiting, training, stockpiling resources. My analysts estimate we have 3 to 6 months before they're ready for a major offensive. He looked between Theon and Elena, which is why I'm here. Ironwood cannot stand alone against this threat. No single pack can. We need the kind of alliance that defeated them before. We need the Alpha King to rally the territories. Theon stood and walked to the window, staring out at Silver Pine's recovering lands. Elena could feel his internal struggle through their bond, the weight of old trauma warring with the responsibility of leadership. If I call the alliance, Theon said slowly, it means war. It means pulling every pack into a conflict that will cost lives, resources, and stability. It means young wolves who've never known real combat will be sent to face fanatics willing to die for their cause. And if you don't call the alliance, Garrett countered, the Red Crescent will pick us off one by one. They'll start with the smaller packs, the vulnerable ones. They'll gain momentum and power until they're unstoppable. He stood as well, his voice urgent. You know what they're capable of, Theon. You've seen what happens when ideology like theirs goes unchecked. We have to stop them now, while we still can. Elena moved to stand beside Theon, placing her hand on his arm. Through their bond, she sent waves of support, of strength, of absolute certainty that whatever he decided, she would stand with him. Theon covered her hand with his own, drawing comfort from her presence. Finally, he turned back to Garrett. You're right, we can't let history repeat itself. He straightened, and suddenly he wasn't just a man. He was the Alpha King, the warrior who'd fought in the first Blood Wars and emerged victorious. I'll call the alliance. We gather the pack leaders at Shadowland in 2 weeks. We prepare for war. Garrett's relief was palpable. Thank you. Ironwood stands ready to answer your call. After Garrett departed, Elena and Theon remained in the receiving room, both processing the magnitude of what was coming. Tell me about the Blood Wars, Elena said quietly. The real story, not the sanitized version from history books. Theon was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. I was younger then, not naive, but less scarred, less cynical. The Red Crescent emerged slowly, presenting themselves as a movement for pack purity and preserving tradition. By the time we realized what they really were, a genocidal cult bent on eliminating anyone they deemed inferior, they'd already infiltrated dozens of packs. He moved to the liquor cabinet and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Elena. The war was brutal. They didn't just attack warriors, they targeted pups, elders, anyone they considered weak. They burned entire pack houses with families inside. They poisoned water supplies. They used tactics designed to maximize suffering and terror. Elena felt sick. How did you finally defeat them? We had to become as ruthless as they were, Theron said, and the pain in his voice told Elena this still haunted him. We tracked them to their stronghold at Blackmore Keep. the same place Garrett's scouts just found the new recruits. We laid siege for 3 months. When we finally breached the walls, the fighting was savage. Hand to hand, wolf against wolf, the keep ran red with blood. That's where the name Blood Wars truly came from. He drank deeply from his glass. We killed their leader, a wolf named Malachi Redclaw, and every member of his inner circle. Then we hunted down the survivors across the territories. It took years, but we thought we'd eliminated the threat completely. And now they're back, Elena said. Now they're back, Theron agreed. Which means either we were less thorough than we thought, or someone's been quietly rebuilding the movement for decades, waiting for the right moment. Elena set down her glass and turned to face him fully. What do you need from me? From Silverpine? Everything, Theron said honestly. This isn't just Shadowlands fight. Every pack will need to contribute warriors, resources, intelligence. Silverpine is still recovering, but we're strong enough to stand, Elena interrupted. And we will. These extremists want to eliminate weak bloodlines. I'm living proof that their ideology is garbage. 6 months ago, they would have called me weak, worthless, someone to be culled. Now I'm alpha of my own pack and mated to the Alpha King. Let them come. I'll show them what we can do. Theron smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time since Garrett had mentioned the Red Crescent. That's my mate. Fierce, even in the face of genocidal fanatics. I learned from the best, Elena said, echoing her earlier words. Then, more seriously, what's our timeline? What needs to happen in the next 2 weeks? Theron shifted into strategic mode, his mind already working through the logistics. First, we send messengers to every pack in the Northern Territories, not requests, commands. The Alpha King is calling an alliance, and attendance is mandatory. Any pack that refuses will be considered hostile. He began pacing, the way he always did when planning complex operations. Second, we need to accelerate Silverpine's military readiness. Your pack members have basic training, but they're not prepared for this level of combat. I'll send some of my best warriors to drill your fighters. We have 2 months, maybe less, to turn farmers and craftsmen into soldiers. Third, Elena added, picking up his thread, we need intelligence. Garrett's scouts provided good information, but we need more. Numbers, leadership structure, supply lines, strategic objectives. Everything. Exactly. Theron stopped pacing and looked at her. Which brings me to something difficult. The intelligence gathering will be dangerous. It will require infiltration, possibly capture of Red Crescent members for interrogation. It's not pretty work. You're asking if I'm willing to do what's necessary, said. The answer is yes. These wolves want to create a world where people like me don't exist, where anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of pure is eliminated. I'll do whatever it takes to stop them. Theron crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands. You're sure? Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. War changes people, Elena. Even necessary wars, even righteous ones. I'm already changed, Elena reminded him. I was murdered and reborn. I survived poison and betrayal and a 300-foot fall. A war isn't going to break me now. No, Theron agreed softly. I don't suppose it will. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation that left Elena feeling like she was living in a perpetual state of controlled chaos. Messengers rode out to every corner of the Northern Territories, carrying the Alpha King's summons. Responses came back swiftly, most pledging immediate support, a few requesting clarification, none outright refusing. The memory of what happened to those who opposed the Alpha King during the first Blood Wars was apparently still fresh enough to compel cooperation. Silverpine's transformation accelerated again, but this time the focus shifted from agricultural recovery to military readiness. Theron sent 10 of his elite warriors, veterans of countless border conflicts, to train Silverpine's fighters. What had been casual sparring became brutal combat drills, What had been theoretical weapon training became practical exercises in killing efficiently. Elena threw herself into the training alongside her pack members. She wouldn't ask anyone to do something she wasn't willing to do herself. She learned tactical formations, coordinated pack attacks, and the brutal efficiency of combat in wolf form. The white wolf was powerful, yes, but power without discipline was just rage. She needed to be a weapon her pack could rely on. Gideon Thornfield proved invaluable, his military background, from his youth coming back as he helped coordinate the training rotations and supply logistics. Raina Steele, the head of security Elena had appointed, revealed a tactical mind that impressed even Theron's veterans. Slowly, steadily, Silverpine was becoming something it had never been before, a military force. But preparation wasn't all combat training. Elena also spent hours in council meetings coordinating with other pack leaders who were doing their own preparations. She learned about supply chains and communication networks, about medical, triage and evacuation routes, about all the unglamorous logistics that made the difference between victory and defeat. Through it all, Theron was a constant presence, sometimes literally at her side, sometimes connected through their bond, even when separated by miles. He pushed her, challenged her, forced her to think like a general rather than just a warrior. And in the quiet moments between crises, he held her and reminded her why they were fighting. For pack, Theron would say, the old warrior's prayer. For territory, Elena would respond. For the future, for those who can't fight, for survival, for life itself. It became their ritual, their reminder of what mattered when the weight of impending war threatened to crush them both. The day of the Alliance gathering arrived with crisp, clear weather that seemed at odds with the gravity of the occasion. Silverpine's delegation departed for Shadowland at dawn. Elena, Gideon, Raina, and 6 warriors representing different aspects of pack life. They traveled in convoy with delegations from 3 smaller packs who bordered Silverpine territory. Strength in numbers, even for this relatively short journey. Shadowland's fortress was impressive, in a way that Silverpine's manor house could never be. Built into the mountain itself, the structure was part castle, part cave system, defensible and imposing. As their convoy approached, Elena could see other delegations arriving, banners representing packs from across the territories, alphas and their chosen warriors gathering for war. The grand hall where the meeting would be held was enormous, easily capable of holding 500 wolves. Ancient banners hung from the rafters, remnants of the First Alliance, the one that had defeated the Red Crescent 2 centuries ago. Seeing them now felt like both inspiration and warning. Theron stood at the head of the hall on a raised platform, looking every inch the Alpha King. He wore formal armor, ceremonial but that caught the light like moonlight on water. His violet eyes scanned the gathering crowd, cataloging faces, assessing loyalty, calculating who could be counted on when the fighting started. When his gaze landed on Elena, something in his expression softened, just for a moment, just enough for her to see it through their bond, pride, love, and bone-deep gratitude that he wouldn't face this alone. The hall slowly filled with pack leaders and their delegations. Elena recognized Alpha Garrett from Ironwood, standing with 3 of his most trusted warriors. She saw representatives from Stormcrest, Crimson Fang, Silver Stream, Night Hollow, and dozens of other packs whose names she was still learning. Hundreds of wolves, all gathered because the Alpha King had called them. When the last delegation entered and the massive oak doors closed with a resounding boom, Theron stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout or demand attention. He simply radiated alpha authority so powerful that every wolf in the hall turned to face him and fell silent. 200 years ago, Theron began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, our people faced extinction. The Red Crescent rose up with a vision of wolf purity, that was really just genocide in a prettier package. They killed 50,000 of our kind before we stopped them. Pups burned in their dens. Elders slaughtered for being too old. Omegas executed for being weak. Betas eliminated for not being alpha. He let that sink in before continuing. We defeated them. We thought we'd eliminated them completely. We were wrong. Theron gestured to Alpha Garrett, who stepped forward to present the intelligence gathered. More photographs, reports from scouts, testimony from wolves who'd been approached by Red Crescent recruiters. The evidence was damning and undeniable. They're calling themselves the new Red Crescent, Gareth explained. Same ideology, same goals, same tactics. But this generation is more sophisticated. They're using propaganda, social media, recruiting young wolves who feel disenfranchised or left behind. They're presenting themselves as champions of tradition, while hiding their true genocidal intent until recruits are too deep in to back out. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some wolves looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few, and Elena made careful note of who looked uncomfortable, as if the Red Crescent's rhetoric resonated with beliefs they held but had never voiced. How many have they recruited? Called out an alpha Elena didn't recognize. Confirmed, numbers are around 400, Gareth replied. But we suspect there are sympathizers hidden within established packs who haven't declared themselves yet. The First Blood War taught us that the Red Crescent's greatest weapon was infiltration. The uncomfortable murmuring grew louder. Everyone in the hall was suddenly looking at their neighbors with suspicion, wondering who might be a hidden enemy. Theron raised his hand and silence fell again. Which is why we're not going to rely on trust alone. Every wolf who pledges to this alliance will undergo verification. Blood oaths, pack magic, binding spells that prevent betrayal. It's invasive and uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Anyone who refuses verification will be asked to leave the territories until this conflict is resolved. That's extreme. Someone protested, so is genocide. Theron replied flatly, "We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will not allow infiltrators to undermine us from within. You want to be part of this alliance? You prove your loyalty. No exceptions." Elena watched the crowd's reaction. Some wolves nodded in agreement. Others looked affronted, but no one left. The threat of the Red Crescent was real enough that even the proud and stubborn were willing to submit to verification. Now, Theron continued, let's discuss strategy. For the next 3 hours, the Alliance hammered out plans. Defensive positions were assigned. Supply lines were established. Communication protocols were created. Intelligence gathering operations were approved. And most importantly, a command structure was formalized, Theron, as Supreme Commander with a council of experienced alphas, serving as generals and specialized units formed for different types of combat. Elena found herself appointed to the council as the representative for newly restored packs. It was a political move showing that the Alliance valued recovery and rebuilding, not just raw military power, but it was also practical. Elena's recent experience fighting corruption and healing cursed territory gave her perspective others lacked. As the meeting finally wound down, Theron made one final announcement. The Red Crescent will make their move within 3 months, possibly sooner. They know we're gathering. They know we're preparing. They'll want to strike before we're ready. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every alpha present, so we don't give them that chance. 2 weeks from now, we launch a preemptive strike against their stronghold at Blackmore Keep. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and we remind them what happens when they threaten our people. The hall erupted in howls of approval. This was what warriors understood, not just defense, but decisive action. Not waiting for the enemy to come to them, but taking the fight to the enemy's doorstep. Elena joined the howls, her wolf surging close to the surface. She was ready. Silverpine was ready. The Alliance was ready. Let the Red Crescent come. Let them test the White Wolf and the Alpha King and see how quickly their ideology crumbled against the reality of united strength. The Blood Wars had begun again, but this time they would end before they truly started. That night, after the delegations had been shown to their quarters and the fortress had settled into an uneasy quiet, Elena found Theron on the battlements overlooking the valley below. He stood alone, hands braced on the stone wall, staring out at the darkness. She approached silently and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Through their bond, she felt what he wouldn't say aloud. The fear that history was repeating, that he would lose people he cared about, that this war would cost more than any of them were prepared to pay. "We'll win," Elena said quietly. "We're stronger than them, smarter than them, and we have something they don't." "What's that?" Theron asked, his voice rough. "A reason to fight that isn't just hate," Elena replied. "They fight to destroy, we fight to protect. That makes all the difference." Theron turned in her arms and pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "I survived 200 years alone. I can't go back to that. Not after knowing what it's like to have you." "You won't lose me," Elena promised, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. War didn't care about love or bonds or fate. War just consumed. "But if something happens, if things go wrong, you have to promise me something, anything." "You keep fighting," Elena said fiercely. "You don't give up. You don't fall into despair. You finish this. You protect the people who need protecting. You become the king they need, even if it costs you everything. Promise me." Theron pulled back to look at her, his violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I promise, but only if you promise me the same. If I fall, you keep leading. You keep Silverpine strong. You keep the alliance together. You become the queen I know you can be." "I promise," Elena said. They kissed under the stars, two alphas preparing for war, knowing that everything could change in an instant, but choosing hope anyway, choosing love anyway, choosing to believe that the future they were fighting for was possible. Far to the east, at the ruins of Blackmore Keep, the Red Crescent's new leader, a wolf named Cassius Bloodmoon, stood before his assembled forces. 400 fanatics, all sworn to his vision of wolf purity, all ready to kill and die for the cause. "The alliance is gathering," Cassius announced to his followers. "The Alpha King thinks he can defeat us like he did our predecessors. But we are not the Red Crescent of old. We are smarter, faster, more committed, and we have something they don't." He gestured to a figure in the shadows, a wolf whose scent was masked by powerful magic, whose remained hidden. "We have a spy in Shadowland itself, someone close to the Alpha King, someone who will give us everything we need to destroy them from within." The figure stepped into the firelight just enough to be seen, but not identified. "The Alliance meets in 2 weeks," the spy reported, "and then they plan to attack. But we'll be ready. We'll turn their preemptive strike into their funeral." Cassius smiled, showing teeth. "Let them come. Let the Alpha King bring his mongrel armies. We'll paint the stones of Blackmore Keep with their blood and build our pure world on their bones." The Red Crescent howled their approval, the sound echoing across the ruins like a promise of death. The Blood Wars had begun and only one side could survive. Chapter 10. The final battle. The 2 weeks between the Alliance meeting and the assault on Blackmore Keep passed in a blur of final preparations. Every dawn brought new intelligence. Every sunset brought new concerns. The Red Crescent's numbers had swollen to nearly 600, faster recruitment than anyone had anticipated. But the Alliance had grown as well, with over 1,000 warriors now pledged to Theron's command. Elena stood in Shadowland's war room 3 days before the planned attack, studying the detailed maps and tactical plans spread across a massive table. Theron was beside her, along with Alpha Gareth, Reyna Steele, and 4 other high-ranking commanders. They'd been at this for 6 hours refining the assault strategy, accounting for every variable they could imagine. The keep has 3 points of entry, Reyna explained, pointing to the map. The main gate, which will be heavily defended, the eastern postern gate, which is smaller but potentially less guarded, and the old siege tunnel on the northern face, which may or may not still be accessible. The tunnel is a death trap, Alpha Gareth said grimly. If they know about it, and they should, given their use of the keep, they'll have it rigged to collapse or filled with defenders. Anyone who goes in that way won't come out. Unless we use it as a distraction, Elena suggested. All eyes turned to her. We send a small force, volunteers who know the risks, to make noise at the tunnel. Draw defenders away from the main assault points. It's not about actually breaching through the tunnel. It's about making them split their forces. Theron studied the map, his tactical mind working through the implications. It could work, but Elena's right, it would have to be volunteers. I won't order anyone into a position that's almost certainly suicide. I'll lead the tunnel team. A voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Gideon Thornfield stood there, having entered so quietly no one had noticed. The old warrior's face was set with determination. Gideon? No, Elena protested immediately. You're my second in command. Silver Pine needs you. Silver Pine needs you, Gideon corrected gently. I'm old, Luna. I've lived a full life. I've seen my children grow, my grandchildren born. But these young wolves, he gestured to the map, they have their whole lives ahead. If someone needs to draw fire and possibly die doing it, it should be someone who's already had their time. You're not that old, Elena argued, but she could feel through her alpha senses that Gideon had already made his decision. His mind was set. I'm old enough, Gideon said with a sad smile, and I'm volunteering. That's my right as a free wolf. Theron met Elena's eyes, and she felt his support through their bond, even as her heart broke. We accept your offer, Gideon Thornfield, Theron said formally, and we honor your courage. Choose your team wisely. You'll need wolves who are clever and fast, not just brave. Gideon nodded and withdrew to begin his preparations. Elena's hands clenched into fists on the table. I hate this. I hate that good wolves have to die because fanatics can't accept. Strength comes in different forms. That's war, Garrett said quietly. The good die alongside the bad, and all we can do is try to make sure their sacrifice means something. They continued planning late into the night, refining every detail, preparing for every contingency. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was too easy. The Red Crescent's positions were too clearly marked, their numbers too accurately counted. It felt like the intelligence they were receiving was almost too good. She pulled Theron aside as the meeting was breaking up. Do you trust the intelligence we're getting? She asked quietly. Theron's expression darkened. You've noticed it, too. Yes, I've had the same concern. It's possible we have a spy in the Red Crescent feeding us information, but it's also possible they have a spy feeding us false information to lead us into a trap. What do we do? Elena asked. We proceed as planned, but stay flexible, Theron replied. We position reserve forces that can adapt if the situation changes. We don't commit everything to the initial assault. And he looked at her seriously. We watch our own people. If there's a traitor in the alliance, they'll reveal themselves when it matters most. The night before the assault, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Theron, listening to his steady breathing, feeling his warmth through their bond, but her mind wouldn't quiet. Tomorrow, wolves she'd come to care about would die. Gideon had already said his goodbyes to his family. Reyna had written letters to be delivered to her daughter if she didn't return. Even the young warriors from Silver Pine, barely more than pups, had made their peace with mortality. You're thinking too loudly, Theron murmured, not opening his eyes. I can feel your anxiety through the bond. I can't help it, Elena admitted. What if we're wrong? What if this is exactly what they want us to do? Then we adapt, Theron said, rolling over to face her. Elena, I've led warriors into battle dozens of times over the centuries. Every single time I felt this same dread, this same certainty that I'm about to lead good people to their deaths. But you know what I learned? What? That dread is a good thing. It means you care. It means you value the lives under your command. Leaders who don't feel that dread are the ones who make reckless decisions. He cupped her face gently. You're going to be a great commander, Elena. Not because you're fearless, but because you're afraid, and you lead anyway. Elena kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact, her love, her fear, her desperate hope that they'd both survive to see tomorrow's sunset. If something happens to me tomorrow, she began. Nothing will happen to you, Theron interrupted. But if it does, Elena insisted, I need you to know that these past 6 months have been the best of my life. You saved me, yes, but more than that, you saw me. The real me, the strong me. You never treated me like I was broken or less than. You made me believe I could be powerful. You were always powerful, Thesson said. I just helped you remember. They made love then, slow and tender, a reaffirmation of life in the face of potential death. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they finally slept. The Alliance forces departed for Blackmore Keep at dawn. Over 1,000 wolves moved through the forest in coordinated units, some in wolf form for speed, others in human form to carry weapons and equipment. Elena led the Silver Pine contingent, 60 warriors strong, positioned in the second wave of the main assault. Theron commanded from the center, his violet eyes constantly scanning, assessing, adjusting the formation as they moved. They reached the staging area, a forested ridge overlooking the keep, by mid-morning. Elena's breath caught when she saw their target. Blackmore Keep was massive, far larger than it had appeared in photographs. Ancient stone walls rose 50 feet high, topped with crenellations perfect for archers. The main gate was reinforced with iron bands and flanked by towers, and everywhere she could see movement. Red Crescent warriors preparing for the attack they knew was coming. They're ready for us, Reyna observed grimly. This isn't going to be the surprise strike we hoped for. No, Theron agreed, his expression dark. They've been warned. Which means we definitely have a spy. He raised his voice, addressing the assembled commanders. Change of plan. We're not doing a coordinated assault. We're doing a siege, surround the keep, cut off their supply lines, and force them to come to us. We have the numbers and the resources to wait them out. That could take weeks, Alpha Garrett protested. Our packs can't sustain this kind of deployment indefinitely. Better weeks of siege than a bloodbath running into prepared defenses, Theron countered. He stopped mid-sentence, his head snapping toward the keep. Elena felt it, too, through their bond, a surge of massive alpha power, dark and malevolent, radiating from within the stone walls. That's not possible, Theron whispered, his face going pale. That power signature, I know it. But it can't be. I killed him myself 200 years ago. Who? Elena demanded. Before Theron could answer, the main gates of Blackmore Keep swung open. 600 Red Crescent warriors poured out in perfect formation, their movements coordinated and disciplined in a way that suggested extensive military training. And at their head, riding a massive black warhorse, was a wolf Elena had never seen, but somehow recognized from Theron's memories through their bond. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair despite appearing to be in his prime. His eyes were red, not the normal red of an angry alpha, but a deep crimson that seemed to glow with their own light. He wore black armor etched with red crescents, and when he smiled, his teeth were too sharp, too white, too predatory. Malachi Redclaw, Theron breathed. Impossible. I cut off his head myself. I watched him die. Did you? Malachi's voice, carried across the battlefield, magically amplified. Or did you watch a very convincing duplicate die, while the real me slipped away to rebuild in secret. He laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. 200 years, Theron. 200 years I've been waiting, planning, recruiting, and now finally, we finish what we started. The Red Crescent forces charged. Everything descended into chaos. Elena shifted to her white wolf form and lunged into battle. Around her, the Alliance forces met the Red Crescent's charge with snarls and clashing fangs. The air filled with the sounds of combat, howls, screams, the crunch of bone, the tearing of flesh. The white wolf was a force of nature, larger and faster than almost every wolf on the battlefield. She tore through Red Crescent warriors, her jaws crushing windpipes, her claws disemboweling enemies. But for every wolf she killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. Through the chaos, Elena caught glimpses of other fights. Gideon Thornfield and his tunnel team had abandoned their original plan and joined the main battle, the old warrior fighting with the fury of someone determined to take as many enemies with him as possible. Reyna Steele fought in human form with twin blades, her military training making her a whirlwind of death. Alpha Garrett led his Ironwood wolves in a coordinated assault that drove deep into the Red Crescent's flank. And at the center of it all, Theron faced Malachi. The 2 alphas circled each other, both in human form, both radiating enough power to make nearby stumble. They'd fought before 2 centuries ago, and the memory of that battle informed every move they made now. "You've grown soft, Theron," Malachi taunted. "Taken a mate, built alliances, started caring about the weak and worthless. The wolf I fought 200 years ago would have crushed the Red Crescent without mercy. But you to reform them, tried to make them better. And look where that got you. I learned that killing isn't the answer to everything," Theron replied, his voice cold. "Unlike you, I evolved. I grew. I became something more than just a weapon." "You became weak," Malachi spat, "and weakness must be culled." They attacked simultaneously. The fight was brutal and fast. Malachi fought like a berserker, all aggression and raw power, throwing haymakers meant to crush bone. Theron fought like a surgeon, precise strikes targeting vulnerable points, using his opponent's momentum against him. They were evenly matched, or they would have been if Elena hadn't intervened. The white wolf appeared from nowhere, slamming into Malachi's side and driving him away from Theron. She snapped at his throat, forcing him back, giving Theron room to recover. "The famous white wolf," Malachi said, regaining his footing. "The ancient bloodline everyone's so impressed by. Let me show you what real power looks like." He shifted, but not to a normal wolf. The creature that emerged was massive, easily twice the size of any natural wolf, with red eyes that glowed like coals and black fur that seemed to absorb light. This was something else, something twisted, something wrong. "Blood magic," Theron snarled, shifting to his own wolf form. "You've been using forbidden rituals. That's how you survived. That's how you've stayed young." The 2 massive wolves, Theron's midnight black with violet eyes, Malachi's unnatural nightmare form, charged each other. The white wolf joined the fray, and the battle became a 3-way hurricane of fang and claw. Around them, the larger battle raged. The Alliance was holding, but barely. The Red Crescent's fanaticism made them fearless, willing to die for their cause, and they were taking Alliance warriors with them. Elena caught glimpses of wolves she recognized falling. Their lives ended in seconds of brutal violence. Then she saw it. In the chaos of the battle, one of the Alliance wolves, a male from Stormcrest Pack, suddenly turned on his own companions. He was fast, killing 3 wolves before anyone realized what was happening, and he wasn't the only one. Across the battlefield, perhaps a dozen Alliance wolves revealed themselves as Red Crescent infiltrators, attacking from within. "Traitors!" someone screamed. "We have traitors in the ranks." The Alliance's coordination shattered as wolves turned on each other, unable to tell friend from foe. The Red Crescent pressed their advantage, driving forward, threatening to overwhelm the alliance completely. Elena made a split-second decision. She abandoned the fight with Malachi and shifted to human form, drawing on every ounce of her alpha authority. "Silver Pine!" she roared, her voice magically amplified by the sheer force of her will. To me, form defensive circle. Her warriors responded instantly, breaking away from their individual fights and converging on her position. They formed a tight circle, wolves facing outward, protecting each other's flanks. It wasn't offensive, but it was stable, defensible. "Other packs," Elena continued, "follow our example. Defensive formations, protect your own." The message spread. Other alphas began calling their warriors, forming defensive positions. The chaotic brawl transformed into a more organized battle, alliance wolves in tight formations, Red Crescent forces trying to break them. But it wasn't enough. They were still outnumbered, still taking casualties, and Theron was still locked in combat with Malachi, neither able to gain the upper hand. Elena shifted back to wolf form and charged toward where Theron and Malachi fought. She had to end this. If Malachi fell, the Red Crescent would break. It was their only chance. She lunged at Malachi's exposed flank, her jaws aiming for the vulnerable spot where his leg joined his body. Her teeth sank into flesh, and she tasted blood, wrong blood, corrupted blood, blood that burned her mouth like acid. Malachi howled in pain and fury. He spun, faster than something his size should be able to move, and caught the white wolf with a backhand swipe that sent her flying. She crashed into a pile of rubble, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Through their bond, Elena felt Theron's rage. He threw himself at Malachi with renewed fury, attacking with such ferocity that the nightmare wolf was driven back, stumbling, bleeding from a dozen wounds. "You're finished, Malachi," Theron snarled, his voice somehow understandable even in wolf form. "Your movement ends here. Tonight." "Does it?" Malachi laughed, and the sound was wrong, distorted. "Look around you, King. Your precious alliance is crumbling. Your warriors are dying. Your mate is broken. Even if you kill me, you've lost. The Red Crescent will survive. The ideology will spread. You can't kill an idea, Theron. You can only delay it." "Then I'll delay it forever," Theron said. He lunged for Malachi's throat, moving with every ounce of speed and power he possessed. Malachi tried to dodge, but he was tired, wounded, just a fraction too slow. Theron's jaws closed around Malachi's throat and bit down with the force of 2 centuries of rage and pain and determination. There was a sickening crunch of vertebrae separating, and Malachi's massive body went limp. But as he died, Malachi managed one final act. His claws, still charged with blood magic, raked across Theron's side, opening wounds that glowed with an eerie red light. Cursed wounds. Mortal wounds. Theron collapsed beside Malachi's corpse, his wolf form flickering, struggling to maintain shape. "No!" Elena screamed. She scrambled to her feet and ran to him, shifting back to human form as she dropped to her knees beside him. "Theron, no, you're not dying. You can't die. I won't let you." "Elena." Theron's voice was weak, his violet eyes dimming. "The battle. You have to finish the battle. The battle can wait." Elena sobbed, pressing her hands to his wounds even as the blood magic burned her palms. "You're healing. You'll heal. You're the Alpha King. You can't die from this, blood magic." Theron whispered. "Can't heal, can't fight it. Elena, listen. You have to. Take command, end this." "Win. I can't do this without you," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "Theron, please, don't leave me. We just found each other. We were supposed to have forever." Theron reached up with a shaking hand and cupped her face. "You can. You're strong enough. Always were." His eyes started to close. "Love you, my queen, my mate, my Elena." "No!" Elena shook him. "Stay with me. That's an order. I'm your mate and your equal, and I'm ordering you to stay alive." But Theron's eyes had closed. His breathing had stopped. Through their bond, Elena felt the connection begin to fray, to dissolve, to light. Blinding white light erupted from Elena's body, pouring out of her in waves. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief, it was something else entirely. Something ancient. Something that had been sleeping in her bloodline for generations, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The light washed over Theron's body, and where it touched, the blood magic burned away. The cursed wounds began to close. Color returned to his face, and his eyes, those beautiful violet eyes, snapped open. "What?" Theron gasped, sitting up. "How? I don't know," Elena said, staring at her hands, which still glowed with that strange light. I couldn't let you go." And something inside me woke up. Around them, the battle had stopped. Every wolf on the battlefield, Alliance and Red Crescent alike, had frozen, staring at the white wolf, who glowed like a living star. The light emanating from Elena washed over the battlefield, and where it touched Red Crescent wolves, something changed. The fanatical hatred in their eyes flickered, dimmed, was replaced by confusion. "What's happening?" one of them asked, his voice lost. "Why are we fighting? What are we doing?" The blood magic that had been used to corrupt them, to amplify their hatred and fanaticism, was being burned away by Elena's light. They were seeing clearly for the first time in months or years, and what they saw horrified them. "We killed them," another Red Crescent wolf whispered, staring at the bodies of Alliance warriors. "We killed our own kind." "For what?" "For an ideology we can barely remember believing in. What have we done?" The Red Crescent formation collapsed as wolves began dropping their weapons, falling to their knees, some weeping openly as the full weight of their actions crashed down on them. Elena let the light fade, suddenly exhausted. She swayed, and Theron caught her, his strength already returning thanks to her healing. "What was that?" Alpha Garrett asked, approaching cautiously. "What did you just do?" "I have no idea," Elena admitted. "But I think my bloodline carries more than just ancient wolf powers. I think there's healing magic, too. Purification magic, the ability to burn away corruption and show truth." Theron shook his head in wonder. "That's not wolf magic. That's older. Much older." "Elena, I think you might be descended from the original lichen healers, the ones who could cure madness and break curses. That bloodline was thought to be extinct." "Apparently not," Elena said weakly. "The battle was over. Malachi Redclaw was dead, truly dead this time. His body already turning to ash as the blood magic sustaining it failed. The Red Crescent forces had surrendered, their fanaticism broken by Elena's purification, and the Alliance, though battered and bloodied, had survived. But the cost had been high. Gideon Thornfield lay among the dead, his brave heart finally stilled. Reyna Steele had survived but lost her left arm. Dozens of other warriors would never see their homes again. Elena stood before the assembled Alliance as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that seemed both beautiful and mocking given the blood that stained the ground. "The Red Crescent is finished," she announced, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "Their leader is dead. Their followers are freed from corruption. But we can't celebrate, not yet. Not when we've paid such a terrible price." She looked at the captured Red Crescent wolves, seeing not enemies but victims of manipulation and dark magic. "You will be given a choice. Submit to rehabilitation and work to repair the damage you've caused, or face exile. We don't believe in genocide. We don't believe in calling the weak. We believe in second chances for those who deserve them." She turned to the Alliance warriors, and to those who fought today, who gave blood and life to protect our people. "You have proven that strength isn't about purity or bloodlines. It's about courage, about standing for what's right even when it's hard, about protecting those who can't protect themselves." Elena felt Theron's presence beside her, his hand finding hers. Together, they addressed both armies. "The blood wars end tonight," Theron declared. "Not because we killed all our enemies, but because we refused to become like them. We chose a better path. We chose life over death, unity over division, hope over hate, As the sun finally set, casting long shadows across Blackmore Keep, the wolves began the grim work of tending to the wounded and honoring the dead. The war was over, but the real work, the work of healing, of rebuilding, of creating the future they'd fought for, was only beginning. 3 months later, Elena stood in the rebuilt garden behind Silver Pine's pack house, watching the first true spring bloom since the curse had been broken. The territory was thriving now, crops growing tall, livestock healthy, the river running clear and full of fish. The scars of corruption were fading. Theron approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Through their bond, she felt his contentment, his peace, his love. "Thinking about Gideon?" he asked gently. "Always," Elena admitted. "He deserved to see this, to see what his sacrifice achieved. He knows," Theron assured her. "The dead always know. They live in the land we protect, in the peace we've created, in the future we're building." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. Theron's eyes widened and shone with joy. You're sure?" "Dr. Bennett confirmed it this morning, 3 weeks along." Elena smiled. "I wanted you to be the first to know." "Well, second. The first was Gideon's granddaughter. I thought his bloodline should know that their sacrifice wasn't in vain, that life continues." Theron kissed her, soft and reverent. "A pup. We're having a pup." "We are," Elena confirmed. "And they'll grow up in a world where strength isn't measured by bloodline purity or the ability to dominate others. They'll grow up knowing that real power comes from compassion, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what's right. They'll grow up knowing their mother is a legend." Theron added with a smile. "The white wolf who healed an alpha king and ended a war with light instead of violence." Elena laughed. "And their father is the alpha king who united the territories and proved that even ancient enemies can change." They stood together in the garden, watching the sun set over their territory, knowing that challenges would still come, but facing the future unafraid. They'd survived attempted murder, conspiracy, war, and loss. Whatever came next, they would face it together as equals, as mates, as the beginning of something better. The girl who'd been pushed off a cliff was gone, dead in the mud and rocks of the Shadowvane River. But the woman who'd risen in her place, the queen, the warrior, the healer, was exactly where she was meant to be, home. From betrayed mate to alpha queen, Elena Ashford rewrote her entire story. Real talk, though, Elena chose healing and mercy. She offered Damien and Vivian 10 years of redemption service instead of execution. But if you were pushed off that cliff, poisoned for 18 years, and watched your best friend help plan your murder, could you be that noble, or would you have gone full villain arc? Do you think they got the punishment they deserved? Or was watching Elena thrive the cruelest punishment of all? Be honest in the comments. No judgment. And if Elena's story hit different, smash that like button. See you in the next one.